A millionaire took a poor boy to his house for one night on Christmas Eve. At dawn, he was shocked to discover what he had done to his wife. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast harsh shadows across the emergency room corridor. William Thompson's hands trembled as he cradled his unconscious wife, Sarah, her skin pale and clammy against his shirt. The night shift nurses rushed around them, their footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. "Stay with me," Sarah William whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, just stay with me," he watched helplessly as her breathing grew more labored, each breath a struggle against an invisible force threatening to take her away. Michael, the 8-year-old boy they had taken in just days ago, stood frozen in the corner, his small frame shaking with silent sobs. His worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as he shifted his weight, torn between running away and staying to face what might be another loss in his young life. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Reynolds emerged from the emergency room, her face grave. "Your wife's condition is critical. The toxicology reports show severe food poisoning, but there's something else we can't identify. It's as if..." The doctor's voice faded into background noise as William remembered Richard Montgomery's smirking face at the restaurant earlier that day. The way he had watched them eat, the strange gleam in his eyes when Sarah had first shown symptoms. "She was fine this morning," William's voice cracked. "We were all fine." How could this happen so fast? He clutched Sarah's hand tighter as another wave of convulsions racked her body. The monitors beeped frantically, their urgent rhythm a countdown he refused to acknowledge. Michael inched closer, his small hand reaching out to touch Sarah's arm. "Please don't leave," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You promised we'd be a family." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of too many broken promises in the boy's life. The medical team burst through the doors, their urgent voices mixing with the chaos of beeping machines. "We need to move her now," Dr. Reynolds commanded. "Her organs are starting to fail." As they wheeled Sarah away, William caught a glimpse of her face, so peaceful despite the battle raging within her body. Michael's grip on his hand tightened, and in that moment William saw the same fear in the boy's eyes that he felt in his own heart, the terror of losing someone who had finally made them feel whole again. Standing in the now empty corridor, William pulled Michael close, their shared grief bridging the gap between stranger and family. The hospital's antiseptic smell mixed with the lingering scent of Sarah's perfume on his shirt, a cruel reminder of how quickly happiness could shatter. "What if she..." Michael couldn't finish the sentence, his voice choked with tears. "We can't think like that," William responded, though his own voice betrayed his fear. "Sarah's strong. She's a fighter," but as the emergency room doors swung closed, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just food poisoning. Something deliberate. Something evil. The night stretched ahead of them, endless and uncertain, as they waited for news that could either heal their newly formed family or tear it apart forever. 12 hours earlier, the Thompson family dining room had been filled with warmth and laughter. Sarah sat at the head of the table, her golden hair catching the morning light as she served breakfast. The food had come from Montgomery's, the most prestigious restaurant in town, specially prepared for their first family breakfast with Michael. "Try the eggs," Michael Sarah encouraged, watching the boy's hesitant expression. "Richard Montgomery himself prepared this breakfast for us." Her voice carried the excitement of creating a special moment for their new family member. Michael picked at the food carefully, years of street survival making him wary of unfamiliar meals. William and Sarah exchanged worried glances, their hearts aching at his cautious approach to even the simplest gestures of care. The first signs appeared subtle and innocent. Sarah touched her throat, a slight grimace crossing her face as she swallowed. "The coffee tastes a bit strange today," she murmured, but continued drinking, not wanting to dampen the morning's joy. Within an hour, her hands began trembling. The coffee cup clattered against the saucer as she set it down, spilling dark liquid onto the pristine tablecloth. "I'm feeling a bit dizzy," she admitted, pressing her palm against her forehead. William noticed her complexion turning ashen. "Sarah, you don't look well." He reached across the table, touching her hand. It felt cold and clammy, despite the warm morning. Michael watched with growing anxiety, his own plate untouched. He'd seen illness on the streets, knew how quickly it could turn deadly. "Mrs. Thompson," his voice quavered, "your lips are turning blue." Sarah tried to stand but stumbled, catching herself on the table's edge. The room spun around her as waves of nausea hit with increasing intensity. "Something's wrong," she gasped, her breathing becoming labored. "The food. There's something wrong with the food." William rushed to her side as she collapsed into her chair, her body beginning to convulse. Michael backed away, terror etched across his young face. This scene was too familiar. It reminded him of his mother's final moments, alone in their cold apartment. "Call an ambulance," William shouted, cradling Sarah as she fought for breath. Michael ran for the phone, his small fingers shaking as he dialed 911. Sarah's eyes met William's, fear mixing with confusion. "The breakfast," she whispered between spasms. "Richard." He watched me eat. He insisted I try everything. The memory of Richard Montgomery's strange behavior that morning suddenly clicked into place. His insistence on personally preparing their breakfast, his lingering presence as they collected their order, the odd smile as he watched Sarah sample the food in the restaurant. As sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah's condition deteriorated rapidly. Michael stood in the doorway, clutching his untouched plate, a horrible realization dawning in his young mind. The food he'd been too scared to eat might have saved him from whatever was now attacking Sarah's body. As the ambulance rushed Sarah to the hospital, William and Michael raced to Montgomery's restaurant, desperate for answers. The evening crowd buzzed inside, unaware of the drama unfolding. Richard Montgomery stood behind the counter, his expensive suit and carefully styled grey hair projecting an image of refined sophistication that masked something darker beneath. "Mr. Thompson," Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Twice in one day. To what do I owe this pleasure?" His gaze flickered to Michael, lips curling with barely concealed disgust. William stepped forward, his voice tight with controlled rage. "The breakfast you prepared this morning, something was wrong with it. Sarah's in the hospital." He placed his hands on the counter, knuckles white. "What did you do, Richard?" Richard's demeanor shifted instantly. The polite facade cracked, revealing a cold, calculating expression. "That's a serious accusation." "William," he leaned forward, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Especially from someone harboring street trash in their home." Michael flinched at the words, shrinking behind William. The restaurant owner's eyes tracked the movement, a predatory gleam appearing in them. "You know," Richard continued, "accidents happen all the time in affluent homes. Children like him," he nodded toward Michael, "they bring trouble. Sometimes things go missing. Sometimes people get hurt." William's jaw clenched. "Are you threatening my family?" "Threatening?" Richard laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "I'm giving you friendly advice. You had such a perfect life, William. Beautiful wife, successful career." He shook his head in mock disappointment. "Then you let this gutter rat into your home, and suddenly your wife falls ill. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" "You're trying to frame Michael." William's voice rose, drawing attention from nearby diners. Richard's hand shot out, gripping William's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen carefully," he hissed. "You have no proof of anything, but I have security footage of that boy." He jerked his head toward Michael lurking around my kitchen this morning. "Who do you think the police will believe? A respected business owner or a homeless child?" Michael stepped forward, his small voice steady despite his fear. "I saw you put something in the food when Mr. David wasn't looking." Richard's face darkened. "David," he released William's wrist, straightening his suit jacket. "Interesting you should mention him. Poor David had an unfortunate accident earlier today. Such a tragedy." But the threat hung heavy in the air. William pulled Michael close, protective instinct overriding everything else. "Get out of my restaurant," Richard commanded, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken menace. "And remember, some stories are better left untold. For everyone's sake." As they left, Richard's voice followed them. "Give my regards to Sarah, if she makes it through the night." William hurried Michael to the car, his mind racing. Behind them, Richard watched through the window, his reflection distorted in the glass, a silent warning of what was to come. Back at the hospital, Dr. Reynolds pulled William aside, her expression grave as she held up Sarah's test results. "Mr. Thompson, we found traces of industrial cleaning solution in your wife's system. This wasn't just food poisoning, someone deliberately contaminated her food." William's heart hammered against his chest as Michael's earlier words echoed in his mind. The boy had seen something. Behind them, through the observation window, Sarah lay motionless, machines monitoring her failing organs. "There's more," Dr. Reynolds continued, lowering her voice. "A man was brought in earlier today, David Parker, a kitchen worker from Montgomery's restaurant. He was pronounced dead on arrival. Same symptoms as your wife." William felt the blood drain from his face. David? He was the one who he glanced at Michael, who sat curled in a waiting room chair, his small frame racked with silent sobs. A nurse rushed in, clutching a plastic bag. "Doctor, we found these in Mr. Parker's pocket. Inside were several crumpled papers and a small recorder." Dr. Reynolds carefully extracted a handwritten note, its edges stained with what looked like blood. "Richard's been tampering with the food," William read aloud, his hands shaking. "He targets specific customers, people he thinks are beneath him. I've been collecting evidence, recording everything. Can't let him hurt anyone else. If something happens to me, the proof is in my locker at the restaurant. The key is..." The note ended abruptly, the final words smeared and illegible. William's mind raced back to their confrontation with Richard, the casual mention of David's accident, the calculated threats. Dr. Reynolds touched William's arm gently. "The police need to know about this." "But Mr. Thompson," she hesitated, glancing at the monitors displaying Sarah's vital signs. "You need to be careful. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." In the waiting room, Michael suddenly stood up, his voice small but determined. "I know where Mr. David kept his things. He showed me once, when he was giving me food. There's a loose brick in the back alley, behind the dumpster." William knelt before the boy, placing his hands on Michael's shoulders. "You're sure about this?" Michael nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Mr. David was nice to me. He said if anything bad ever happened, I should tell someone about the brick. He said it would keep people safe." And through the window, Sarah's monitors began beeping more urgently. Dr. Reynolds rushed back to her patient, barking orders to the medical team. William watched helplessly as they worked to stabilize his wife, knowing that somewhere in that restaurant lay the evidence that could save her and condemn the man responsible. He pulled Michael close, feeling the boy tremble against him. "We're going to fix this," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "For Sarah, for David, for everyone Richard has hurt. But first we need to find that proof." The bitter winter wind whipped through the alleyways of downtown, finding every gap in Michael Anderson's threadbare jacket. At 8 years old, he was already familiar with the harsh realities of survival on the streets. 3 months had passed since he found his mother lifeless in their tiny apartment, her body cold after another night of going hungry so he could eat. Michael's small fingers, red and chapped from the cold, clutched a worn photograph, the only possession he had left of his former life. In it, his mother smiled, her eyes bright despite their circumstances, holding a 5-year-old Michael in front of their old apartment building. The edges were frayed, but he kept it carefully folded in his pocket, a reminder of warmth in a world that had grown increasingly cold. During the day, he wandered the busy streets, invisible to the hurrying crowds. The shop windows displayed luxurious Christmas decorations, mocking him with their warmth and cheer. He'd learned quickly which restaurants would give away leftover food at closing time, which dumpsters might hold something edible, and which areas were safe to sleep in at night. The other street kids had tried to recruit him into their gang, offering protection in exchange for helping them steal. But Michael remembered his mother's words, "Your heart is what makes you rich, Michael. Never let the world steal that from you." So he stayed alone, surviving on his wits and whatever scraps he could find. Some nights, huddled in his cardboard shelter behind the grocery store, he would hear other children crying in the darkness. The sound reminded him of his own tears, shed silently in the hospital waiting room, as the social worker explained that with no known relatives, he would become a ward of the state. He had run away that night, terrified of being lost in a system his mother had always warned him about. During the day, he would watch families through restaurant windows, studying their interactions like a scientist observing an alien species. He saw children his age complaining about their food while their parents patiently coaxed them to eat. The sight would make his empty stomach ache with a pain that went beyond mere hunger. School had been his sanctuary once. Now he could only peek through classroom windows, watching other children learn and play. His old backpack, salvaged from their apartment, contained a few precious books, dog-eared textbooks he read by streetlight, determined to keep learning despite everything. His mother had been a teacher before illness took her job, and she had instilled in him a love of knowledge that even homelessness couldn't extinguish. Most painful were the nights when memories of his mother's voice would wake him, her soft singing as she tucked him in, her gentle encouragement when he struggled with homework, her fierce determination as she promised him a better future. Those nights he would clutch the photograph tighter, trying to remember the feeling of her arms around him, the scent of her dollar store perfume, the sound of her laugh. The streets had taught Michael to be invisible when necessary and quick when opportunity arose. He learned to read people's faces, to recognize kindness from pity, genuine concern from superficial charity. Most importantly, he learned to hold on to hope, not the naive hope of fairy tales, but the stubborn, resilient hope that had kept his mother going through her darkest days. As winter deepened and temperatures dropped, Michael's world shrunk to a desperate search for warmth and food. Yet even in his darkest moments, he refused to let go of his mother's final words to him, "You are meant for more than this, my brave boy. Promise me you'll never stop believing in goodness." William and Sarah Thompson's mansion stood as a testament to success, its manicured lawns and elegant architecture masking the profound emptiness within. Behind the grand facade, their footsteps echoed through rooms that had once been filled with a child's laughter. Now, those same rooms served as constant reminders of what they had lost. Sarah spent countless hours in what should have been Emily's room, running her fingers over unopened Christmas presents and untouched toys. Their daughter had passed away just 2 days before Christmas the previous year, a sudden illness that swept through her tiny body like wildfire, leaving her parents devastated and their dreams shattered. The room remained exactly as it had been, a preserved memorial to a future that would never unfold. William threw himself into his work at the investment firm, taking on extra clients and longer hours, anything to avoid the silence at home. His success had always been driven by a desire to give his family everything he never had growing up. Now, that motivation felt hollow, meaningless without Emily's bright eyes and infectious giggle to make it worthwhile. Their marriage, once enviably strong, strained under the weight of their grief. Sarah had quit her job as a pediatric nurse, unable to bear the sight of other people's healthy children. Some days she wouldn't leave their bed, lost in memories of Emily's last Christmas concert, her small voice singing carols with her kindergarten class. William would find her clutching Emily's favorite stuffed rabbit, tears silently streaming down her face. Friends and family tried to help, but their well-meaning advice and attempts at comfort only highlighted the magnitude of their loss. You can always have another child, some would say, not understanding that Emily wasn't replaceable. Each dinner party invitation declined, each baby shower avoided, pushed them further into isolation. The Thompsons' wealth, which had once seemed to guarantee a charmed life, now felt like a cruel joke. Their spacious home had become a museum of grief, each room holding memories that were simultaneously precious and painful. The swimming pool where Emily had learned to swim remained untouched, its cover permanently in place. The garden where she had planted sunflowers with Sarah lay neglected, weeds overtaking the carefully tended beds. Sarah's breakdown came during a charity gala they couldn't avoid. A little girl, about Emily's age, had run past their table wearing the same style of party dress they had bought for their daughter's last birthday. Sarah had fled the ballroom, gasping for air, while William stood frozen, the child's laughter echoing in his ears like a ghost from their past. That night marked a turning point. As William held his sobbing wife in their car, Sarah finally voiced what they had both been feeling. "We're not living, William. We're just existing in a shrine to our loss." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. Their attempt to preserve Emily's memory had become a prison of grief. Gradually, they began discussing the possibility of helping other children. Sarah tentatively volunteered at a local children's hospital, finding that helping others eased her own pain. William started a scholarship foundation in Emily's name, providing medical care for underprivileged children. Yet their home remained childless, the empty rooms a constant reminder of their loss. They had everything money could buy, but the one thing they desperately wanted, the sound of a child's laughter filling their halls again, seemed forever out of reach. The approach of another Christmas season brought fresh waves of grief, memories of Emily's excitement over holiday preparations haunting every decorated store window and twinkling light. Maybe Sarah would whisper in the dark hours of the night, "Somewhere out there is a child who needs us as much as we need them." William would hold her closer, both of them afraid to hope too much, yet unable to completely let go of the possibility that their capacity to love hadn't died with Emily. David Parker moved through Montgomery's restaurant's bustling kitchen with quiet efficiency, his weathered hands steady as he worked. At 55, his graying hair and lined face told stories of hardship, but his eyes retained a warmth that years of struggle hadn't managed to extinguish. The other staff called him Silent Dave, not knowing that his quietness masked a burden he'd carried for 15 years. Every morning, he arrived 2 hours before his shift, using the extra time to prepare meals for the homeless who gathered in the alley behind the restaurant. This ritual began after his own son, Jimmy, died on the streets at just 12 years old. The memory of finding Jimmy cold and alone behind a dumpster haunted David's dreams and drove his commitment to helping others. When Richard Montgomery had bought the restaurant 5 years ago, David had watched the establishment transform from a family-friendly diner into an exclusive eatery. The new owner's disdain for the less fortunate reminded David of the society that had turned its back on Jimmy during his final days. Yet David stayed, knowing his position allowed him to help those who needed it most. His small apartment above the local hardware store contained only basic furnishings, but the walls were covered with photographs, Jimmy's school pictures, family snapshots from happier times, and now pictures of the street children he'd helped over the years. Each face represented a chance to prevent another tragedy like Jimmy's. David's wife had left shortly after Jimmy's death, unable to bear the weight of their shared grief. He understood some pain was too heavy to carry together. The divorce papers arrived with a note, "I hope you find peace." He never remarried, channeling all his love into helping others' children instead. The restaurant's kitchen became his sanctuary and battlefield. During quiet moments, he would slip extra food into his pockets, bread rolls still warm from the oven, wrapped portions of soup, anything that could ease a hungry child's suffering. He knew the risks. Richard had fired 3 employees for similar acts of kindness. But David couldn't watch another child go hungry, not while he had the means to help. His co-workers noticed his special attention to the street children who pressed their faces against the restaurant's windows. Where others saw nuisances, David saw reflections of Jimmy hungry, hopeful eyes searching for kindness in a world that had shown them little. He would often stand at the back door during his breaks, distributing food and offering gentle words of encouragement. Recently, David had begun noticing disturbing patterns in Richard's behavior. The owner's cruelty extended beyond mere indifference to the poor. There seemed to be a calculated malice in his actions. David started keeping detailed records hidden away in a secret spot behind the kitchen's loose brick. If something happened to him, he wanted evidence of the truth to survive. Each night after his shift ended, David would sit in Jimmy's old room, now converted into a small office. Here, he maintained files on every child he'd helped, tracking their progress, celebrating their successes, and mourning those he couldn't save. The wall calendar marked important dates: Jimmy's birthday, the anniversary of his death, and now the birthdays of the street children who had become his surrogate family. His greatest fear wasn't Richard's discovery of his activities, but rather that he might die before helping enough children to balance the scales of his perceived failure with Jimmy. The guilt of not recognizing his son's struggles sooner, of not being there when Jimmy needed him most, drove David to work harder, help more, give everything he had. In Michael, the newest child to appear at the restaurant's back door, David saw an echo of Jimmy, the same determined spirit, the same quiet dignity in the face of hardship. He knew helping the boy might eventually bring him into direct conflict with Richard, but some risks were worth taking. After all, he had promised Jimmy's memory that he would never again turn away from a child in need. Richard Montgomery stood at his restaurant's window, surveying his domain with cold, calculating eyes. His perfectly tailored suit and manicured appearance masked a darkness that had been festering since his own childhood in poverty. Every gleaming surface of Montgomery's restaurant reflected his obsession with perfection and control, a monument built on buried secrets and broken lives. His rise from poverty to prominence hadn't made him sympathetic to the struggling. Instead, it had hardened him. The sight of homeless people near his establishment filled him with a rage that went beyond mere disgust. Each street child reminded him of his former self, the boy who had sworn he would never be powerless again, who had climbed to success by stepping on others. Behind his polished smile lay a history of calculated cruelty. 3 previous restaurants he'd owned had mysteriously burned down, the insurance money funding each new, grander venture. Former employees who threatened to expose his practices disappeared or were discredited, their reputations destroyed by carefully planted evidence. Richard had mastered the art of maintaining a respectable facade while orchestrating destruction. His office walls displayed numerous awards and accolades, each one a trophy in his campaign of deception. Local newspapers praised his charitable contributions, unaware that these donations were merely smokescreens for tax evasion and money laundering. The favorite restaurant of the city's elite, Montgomery served as a perfect cover for his darker enterprises. The security cameras in his office monitored every corner of the restaurant. He watched his employees like a hawk, particularly David Parker, whose acts of kindness sparked a special kind of hatred in Richard. The footage of David secretly feeding street children had become ammunition, carefully stored away for the perfect moment to destroy the man's life. Richard's hatred for the homeless stemmed from a childhood incident he'd never forgotten. His mother, desperate and starving, had begged outside a restaurant much like his own. The owner had not only refused help but had humiliated her publicly. Young Richard had sworn 2 things that day: he would never be hungry again, and he would become the kind of man who held that power over others. His methods of dealing with undesirables had grown more sophisticated over the years. Health inspectors were bribed, police officers were on his payroll, and local politicians frequented his restaurant, ensuring their silence and compliance. Any threat to his carefully constructed world was eliminated with quiet efficiency. The incident with Sarah Thompson hadn't been his first attempt at targeted food tampering. Previous accidents had been carefully orchestrated to remove obstacles or send messages. He kept meticulous records of each incident, Hidden in a secret safe behind his office's false wall, a trophy collection of his victories over those he deemed beneath him. His employees feared him, though they couldn't articulate why. His smile never reached his eyes, and his compliments carried veiled threats. Those who worked closely with him learned to recognize the subtle signs of his mood shifts, the slight tightening of his jaw, the momentary flash of rage in his eyes, the too calm voice that preceded his most violent outbursts. The recent arrival of Michael, the street boy who seemed to touch everyone's hearts, had awakened something particularly dark in Richard. The child's resilience, his refusal to be broken, represented everything Richard had sacrificed in his own rise to power. When the Thompsons took an interest in the boy, it created the perfect opportunity to eliminate multiple problems at once. Standing in his office, watching the security feeds, Richard smiled at his own reflection in the window. The restaurant's evening lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the cruel set of his mouth. He picked up a small vial from his desk, rolling it between his fingers as he contemplated his next move. The Thompsons' interference in his business, their sympathy for the street rats he despised, their connection to that meddlesome David, all of it would be resolved soon enough. The aroma of freshly baked bread drifted from Montgomery's restaurant's back door, making Michael's empty stomach twist painfully. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the winter cold had sapped what little strength he had left. Crouching behind the dumpster, he watched staff members come and go, trying to gather courage to ask for scraps. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows in the alley as restaurant workers hurried through their pre-dinner preparations. Michael had learned to become invisible in these moments, a skill honed through months of survival on the streets. His threadbare jacket, once blue but now a nondescript grey, helped him blend into the urban landscape. A new figure appeared at the back door, an older man with grey hair and kind eyes carrying trash bags to the dumpster. Unlike the others who moved with hurried efficiency, this man moved more deliberately, his gaze scanning the alley as if searching for something. Michael pressed himself further into the shadows, but his foot scraped against a loose piece of gravel. The man paused, turning toward the sound. "It's okay," he said softly, setting down the trash bags. "You can come out. I won't hurt you." His voice carried a warmth that reminded Michael of his mother's. Michael remained frozen, years of street wisdom warring with desperate hunger. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a paper-wrapped package. The smell of fresh bread grew stronger. "My name is David," the man continued, keeping his voice gentle. "I work in the kitchen here. Would you like something to eat?" He placed the package on a clean spot near the dumpster and stepped back, giving Michael space. Hunger finally won over caution. Michael emerged slowly, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. His shoes, held together with duct tape, made no sound on the concrete as he approached. David's eyes filled with a profound sadness as he took in Michael's condition, the too thin frame, the dirty clothes, the wary expression of a child who had seen too much. "What's your name, son?" he asked, remaining still to avoid frightening the boy. Michael came the whispered reply, hands already clutching the package of food. The bread was still warm through the paper. "Hello, Michael," David smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "There's soup in there too, in the container. Be careful. It's hot." He paused, studying the boy's face. "How long have you been out here?" Michael took a small bite of bread, trying to eat slowly despite his hunger. "Since Mom died." 3 months ago, the words came out between careful bites, his eyes never leaving David's face, still ready to run. "I'm sorry about your mother," David said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached back toward the kitchen door. "Wait here a moment." It was a question, not a command. Michael nodded, the warm bread in his stomach creating a feeling of trust he hadn't experienced in months. David disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with a clean blanket and a backpack. "The blanket's wool, it'll keep you warmer than that jacket. And there's more food in the bag, some clean socks, and a water bottle." David set them down within Michael's reach. I'll be here every day at this time, if you're hungry or if you just need to talk." The door behind David suddenly opened, and Richard Montgomery's imposing figure filled the doorway. David smoothly kicked the backpack behind the dumpster while positioning himself between Michael and the door. "Parker, what's taking so long with the trash?" Richard's voice cut through the quiet moment like a knife. "Sorry, sir. Bags broke. Just cleaning up the mess." David's response was immediate, his body language casual, despite the tension Michael could sense. Richard's eyes narrowed, scanning the alley. Michael pressed himself against the wall, becoming invisible once again. After what felt like an eternity, Richard retreated back inside, the door slamming behind him. "You need to go now," David whispered urgently. "But remember, same time tomorrow." And Michael, he waited until the boy met his eyes. "Be careful, Mr. Montgomery. He's not a kind man." Michael grabbed the backpack and blanket, clutching them to his chest like treasures. "Thank you, Mr. David," he whispered, before disappearing into the gathering dusk. That night, wrapped in the warm blanket in his cardboard shelter, Michael ate small bites of the food David had given him, making it last. For the first time since his mother's death, he felt a tiny spark of hope. Someone had seen him not as a nuisance or a charity case, but as a human being worthy of kindness. Over the next few weeks, David developed a careful routine of helping Michael that required the precision of a military operation. He arrived at the restaurant 3 hours before his shift, using the extra time to prepare food packages and gather supplies. Each morning, he would scan local store dumpsters for usable items, discarded clothing, books, anything that might help the boy survive. The restaurant's storage room became his secret command center. Behind stacks of canned goods and cleaning supplies, David created a small space where he kept emergency provisions for Michael. He carefully documented the restaurant's inventory to ensure his diversions wouldn't be noticed, making small adjustments to ordering amounts to cover what he took. "You need to study," David told Michael one cold afternoon, passing him a worn mathematics textbook. "Your mother was a teacher, right? She'd want you to keep learning." They had established a makeshift classroom behind the dumpster, where David would spend his break times helping Michael with schoolwork. The risks grew as Richard's suspicious nature intensified. Security cameras appeared in new locations around the restaurant, and random spot checks of employee lockers became frequent. David learned to be more creative, hiding supplies in hollow spaces behind loose bricks in the alley wall, developing a system of signals with Michael to indicate when it was safe to approach. "If the back door is propped open with the blue brick, it's safe," David explained in whispers. "If you see the red cloth hanging from the window, stay away. That means Richard's watching." Michael absorbed these instructions with the serious attention of a child who understood that survival depended on such details. David's co-workers began to notice changes in his behavior: the extra hours, the mysterious packages, the time spent in the alley during breaks. Most turned a blind eye, some out of respect, others from fear of becoming involved. A few, touched by his dedication, began leaving small contributions: an extra sandwich here, a warm scarf there in places where David would find them. One particularly cold morning, David arrived to find Michael huddled in the alley, shivering violently. Without hesitation, he brought the boy into the warm kitchen through the back entrance, hiding him in the storage room until the shaking subsided. It was a dangerous move, but the sight of the child's blue-tinged lips had made the decision for him. "My son Jimmy," David told Michael that morning as the boy sipped hot chocolate. "He died on a night like this. I couldn't help him then, but I can help you now." The confession hung in the air between them, a shared understanding of loss and hope. David began teaching Michael basic kitchen skills, showing him how to identify safe food in dumpsters and avoid dangerous spoilage. "Knowledge keeps you alive," he would say, demonstrating how to check cans for botulism or recognize when bread was too moldy to salvage. These lessons, delivered in whispered conversations behind the dumpster, were a survival guide disguised as cooking tips. The evidence of Richard's cruelty mounted as David watched and documented. He kept careful notes of suspicious incidents, food tampering, threats to employees, mysterious accidents that befell those who crossed the owner. These records he hid carefully, making multiple copies stored in different locations. "If anything happens to me," he told Michael, showing him the hiding spots, "make sure someone finds these." As Christmas approached, David noticed Richard watching him more closely. The owner's eyes followed him around the kitchen, and questions about his early arrivals became more frequent. David knew he was walking a dangerous line, but the sight of Michael's improving health and brightening spirit made the risks worthwhile. "You remind me so much of Jimmy," David admitted one evening, helping Michael with a particularly difficult math problem. He had the same look in his eyes, like nothing could break his spirit, no matter how hard the world tried. The boy looked up from his textbook, his face serious. "What happened to him, Mr. David?" David's eyes grew distant. "The world can be very cold to children it doesn't see. That's why we have to look out for each other." He squeezed Michael's shoulder gently. "Promise me you'll be careful. Richard, he sees things that make him angry, and he doesn't handle anger well." The day Richard discovered David's secret operation began like any other, but ended in violence that would change everything. Through the restaurant's security cameras, Richard watched David's early morning arrival, his suspicious movements in the storage room, and the regular trips to the back alley. After weeks of observation, he finally had enough evidence to act. Richard waited until the lunch rush had ended, when the kitchen was quietest. He stood in his office, reviewing the security footage one last time, his face darkening with each scene. The sight of David helping Michael, sharing food and teaching him, triggered a rage that had been building for weeks. Parker, Richard's voice cracked like a whip across the kitchen. "My office." Now the other kitchen staff froze, recognizing the dangerous edge in their boss's tone. David wiped his hands slowly on his apron, his face calm despite the tension evident in his shoulders. Inside the office, Richard didn't invite David to sit. Instead, he played the security footage on his computer monitor, showing David's early morning activities. Care to explain this? He paused the video on a frame, showing David passing a package to Michael. "Those are leftover foods that would have been thrown away," David replied steadily. "The boy was hungry. I couldn't just." The sound of Richard's fists slamming onto his desk cut off David's words. "My restaurant is not a charity," he stood, looming over his desk. "That food, those supplies, all of it comes out of my profits. You've been stealing from me, Parker?" "Nothing I gave him would have been sold," David maintained his calm. "It was all marked for disposal." "Marked by you?" Richard's face contorted with rage. "You've been deliberately over-ordering, manipulating inventory, all to feed some worthless street rat." He pulled out a stack of papers, David's carefully documented inventory adjustments. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" David's eyes flickered to the papers, then back to Richard's face. "That boy has a name." "Michael. He's just a child who—" "I don't care what his name is." Richard swept the papers off his desk in a violent gesture. "What I care about is that you've been undermining my business, corrupting my inventory system, bringing vermin to my back door." He stepped around the desk, moving closer to David. "You think you're being kind? Charitable? You're encouraging them. Every piece of bread you give away brings more of them, like feeding stray dogs." "They're not dogs." Richard David's voice hardened. "They're human beings, children. If you had any humanity—" The punch came without warning, catching David in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping, but didn't fall. Richard grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the office wall. "Humanity," Richard spat the word. "I built this place from nothing. I worked my way up from the streets while parasites like your little friend Michael just wait for handouts." He tightened his grip. "And now you're helping them steal what's mine." David met Richard's gaze steadily, despite the pain. "I know about the tampering, Richard. The accidents. I've been keeping records." Richard's face went deadly still. What records? Evidence of everything. The food contamination, the threats, the mysterious fires at your other restaurants. David's voice was quiet but firm. If anything happens to me or Michael, it all goes to the police. Richard released him abruptly, stepping back. His expression shifted from rage to something colder, more calculated. You're fired, Parker. Clear out your locker and get out. If I see you or that boy anywhere near my restaurant again. You'll what? David straightened, rubbing his throat. Add us to your list of accidents. Richard smiled, a chilling expression that didn't reach his eyes. Just remember, accidents happen all the time in this city, to all kinds of people, even children. David's face paled at the implied threat. He turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped him at the door. Oh, and Parker. Those records you mentioned? Better hope nothing happens to them? It would be a shame if a fire destroyed them, along with whatever building they're in. David walked out of the office, past the worried faces of his co-workers, his mind racing. He had to warn Michael, had to protect the evidence. But first, he needed to make one final copy of everything just in case Richard's accident came sooner than expected. David worked frantically through the night, copying his evidence and distributing it to secure locations. His small apartment became a command center of desperate activity as he organized documents, photographs, and recordings. The threat in Richard's voice haunted him. He knew it wasn't idle talk. At dawn, he made his way to Michael's usual hiding spot behind the restaurant. The boy was already there, huddled under the blanket David had given him weeks ago. Michael, he called softly. We need to talk. It's important. The boy emerged from his makeshift shelter, immediately sensing the urgency in David's tone. His eyes widened at the sight of the bruises on David's neck. Mr. David, what happened? Richard knows, David said simply, kneeling to meet Michael's eyes. It's not safe for you here anymore. You need to leave this area. Find somewhere else to stay. He pressed an envelope into Michael's hands. Inside is money and information about a shelter on the other side of town. They'll help you. Michael clutched the envelope, tears forming in his eyes. But what about you? Can't you come with me? David shook his head, forcing a smile. I have to stay and finish something important. But first, I need you to remember exactly what I'm about to tell you. He pulled out a small piece of paper. These are locations where I've hidden evidence of Richard's crimes. If anything happens to me, you need to make sure the police find these. Nothing's going to happen to you, Michael insisted, his voice trembling. You're going to be fine. David cupped the boy's face in his weathered hands. Listen to me. Richard is dangerous. More dangerous than you know. I've spent months gathering proof of what he's done, and now I need to make sure it gets to the right people. He reached into his bag and pulled out a fresh loaf of bread and a thermos of soup. One last breakfast together, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Then you need to go. Promise me you'll go straight to that shelter. They shared the meal in silence, both aware it would be their last. As the sun rose higher, David checked his watch. It's time. Remember everything I told you about the evidence locations and Michael? He paused, pulling the boy into a tight hug. You're so much like Jimmy. You have the same strength, the same heart. Don't let the world take that from you. Michael clung to him, sobbing quietly. I don't want to leave you. You have to. For both our sakes, David gently pushed him away. Go now. Don't look back. As Michael reluctantly walked away, David turned toward the restaurant. He had one final task confronting Richard with the final piece of evidence, the most damaging proof of all. He knew it was likely a suicide mission, but if it kept Michael safe and brought Richard to justice, it would be worth it. He entered through the back door one last time, heading straight for Richard's office. The owner was already there, as if expecting him. Back so soon, Parker Richards' voice dripped with false courtesy. I have copies of everything. Richard David announced, placing a thick envelope on the desk. "All the evidence distributed to multiple locations. If anything happens to Michael or me, it all comes out." Richard's facade of politeness vanished. "You really should have stayed away." He opened his desk drawer, removing something David couldn't see. "Such a shame about your unfortunate accident." David stood his ground, thinking of Michael, of Jimmy, of all the children he'd tried to protect. "You can't hide forever, Richard. The truth always comes out." Hours later, when they found David's body, the official report would call it a heart attack. But Michael, hiding nearby despite David's instructions to leave, saw everything through the office window. He watched in horror as Richard added something to David's coffee, watched his protector collapse, watched Richard calmly make a phone call instead of seeking help. With tears streaming down his face, Michael clutched the paper with the evidence locations closer to his chest. David's final gift to him wasn't just the food or money or shelter information, it was the means to bring his killer to justice. Snow fell softly on Christmas Eve, coating the city streets in a deceptive blanket of peace. William Thompson walked alone through the downtown area, unable to face another silent evening in his too large house. Sarah had gone to bed early, the weight of another Christmas without Emily too heavy to bear. The colorful holiday displays in shop windows only deepened his sense of loss. He passed Montgomery's restaurant, its windows glowing with festive lights and wealthy patrons enjoying their Christmas Eve dinners. Something caught his eye in the alley beside the building, a small movement in the shadows. William paused, peering into the darkness. A child sat huddled against the wall, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Even in the dim light, William could see the boy was shivering violently. Without thinking, he stepped into the alley. "Hello," he called softly, trying not to startle the child. "Are you all right?" The boy's head snapped up, fear evident in his eyes. He scrambled to his feet, ready to run, but his legs buckled beneath him. William rushed forward, catching him before he hit the ground. "Easy there," William said, shocked at how light the boy felt in his arms. "When was the last time you ate?" The child looked up at him, trying to gauge his intentions. "Yesterday." "Maybe," he whispered. Mr. David, usually his voice broke off, fresh tears streaming down his face. "I'm William," he said gently, removing his coat and wrapping it around the boy's shoulders. "What's your name?" Michael, came the quiet response. The coat engulfed his small frame, making him look even younger and more vulnerable. William noticed Michael clutching something, a piece of paper covered in what looked like addresses. "Where are your parents, Michael?" "Mum died," Michael said, his voice barely audible. 3 months ago," and Mr. David, he choked back a sob. "He tried to help me, but now he's gone too." The words hit William like a physical blow. He thought of Emily, of how easily Michael could have been her, had circumstances been different. The boy swayed slightly, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Listen," William said, "making a decision that would change multiple lives. I have a warm car parked just around the corner. How about we get you somewhere safe and warm? Get some food in you?" Michael hesitated, years of street-learned caution warring with desperate need. Are you going to call the police?" William shook his head. "No police. Just a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. My wife's Sarah. She's a good person. We have plenty of room." At the mention of warmth and food, Michael's resistance crumbled. He nodded weakly, still clutching his precious paper. William helped him to his feet, supporting most of his weight as they walked to the car. During the drive, William kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Michael drift in and out of consciousness in the back seat. The boy's clothes were thin and patched, his shoes held together with tape. Each observation tightened the knot in William's chest. "Mr. William," Michael's voice was faint. "Are you sure your wife won't mind?" William thought of Sarah, of her empty arms and aching heart. "No, Michael, I think. I think you might be exactly what we both need right now." As they pulled into the driveway of the Thompson mansion, Michael's eyes widened. "You live here?" "We do," William said, helping him from the car. "And tonight you do too." Inside, the house was warm and decorated for Christmas, though the celebrations had been subdued since Emily's death. William led Michael to the kitchen, quickly preparing hot chocolate and sandwiches. As the boy ate, William called Sarah downstairs. She appeared in her robe, her face showing surprise at the scene in her kitchen. William watched as she took in Michael's condition, the dirty clothes, the haunted eyes, the desperate way he ate, as if each bite might be his last. "Sarah," William said softly, "this is Michael. He needs our help." Sarah stood frozen for a moment, and William held his breath. Then Michael looked up at her, and something in his eyes, the same desperate loneliness she saw in her own mirror each day, broke through her grief. She moved forward slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "You must be freezing," she said, her voice gentle. "How about a warm bath and some clean clothes after you finish eating?" The simple kindness in her voice made Michael's eyes fill with tears. He nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. William watched as his wife's maternal instincts, dormant since Emily's death, awakened in the presence of this wounded child. On this Christmas Eve in their kitchen, something long broken in their home began to heal. Later that night, after Michael had been bathed, fed, and tucked into the guest room bed, Sarah stood in Emily's room, her hands trembling as she touched her daughter's untouched belongings. The moonlight streaming through the window cast shadows across the pink walls, making the stuffed animals seem almost alive. "We need to talk about this," she whispered to William, who stood in the doorway watching her. "You can't just bring home a child and expect." Her voice broke. "Expect everything to be okay." William stepped into the room, careful not to disturb anything. Every item remained exactly as Emily had left it. That last morning, the teddy bear slightly crooked on the bed, her favorite book open to the last page she'd read. "He was freezing to death, Sarah. What was I supposed to do?" "All social services," Sarah replied, but her voice lacked conviction. She picked up Emily's favorite doll, clutching it to her chest. "We're not ready for this. I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready." "He has nowhere else to go," William said softly. "And it's Christmas Eve." Sarah turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "That's exactly why this hurts so much. Last Christmas Eve, we were decorating cookies with Emily. She was so excited about her new bike, she choked back a sob. And now you want to put another child in her place." "Not in her place." William moved closer, gently taking her hands in his. "Never in her place. But Sarah, that boy downstairs has lost everything, just like we have. He's alone, scared, hungry." "I know." Sarah pulled away, pacing the room. "Don't you think I see it? The way he wolfs down food like he might never eat again. The fear in his eyes when he thinks he's done something wrong." "But William, I can't." She gestured helplessly at Emily's room. "I can't risk loving another child only to lose them too." The house creaked in the winter night, and from downstairs came the soft sound of movement. Sarah froze, listening. "He's probably looking for the bathroom," William said. "Everything's strange to him here." Sarah moved to the doorway, peering down the hallway. Michael stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking lost and frightened in the oversized pajamas they'd given him. Without thinking, she descended the stairs. "Are you all right?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle despite her internal turmoil. Michael jumped slightly, then nodded. "I had a bad dream. About Mr. David." His voice was barely a whisper. "He used to check on me at night, make sure I was warm enough." Sarah felt her heart constrict. Who was Mr. David? "He worked at the restaurant. He gave me food and taught me math." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "But he died trying to protect me from the bad man, just like Mom died trying to make sure I had enough to eat." The raw pain in his voice struck a chord deep within Sarah. She recognized the same devastating loss she carried, mirrored in this child's eyes. Before she could stop herself, she was sitting on the stairs beside him. "I lost someone too," she found herself saying. "My daughter Emily. She was about your age." Michael looked up at her, understanding beyond his years in his expression. "That's why you're sad, because she's gone." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. To her surprise, Michael's small hand found hers in the darkness. "Mum used to say that love doesn't go away just because people do," he said softly. Maybe there's room for more love even when it hurts?" The simple wisdom of his words broke something open in Sarah's heart. She looked up to find William standing at the top of the stairs, watching them with tears in his eyes. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" she asked Michael, her voice shaky but warm. "I used to make it for Emily when she had bad dreams." Michael's face lit up with hope. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" "No," Sarah said, standing and offering her hand. "I wouldn't mind at all." As they walked to the kitchen together, Sarah felt the iron grip of grief around her heart begin to loosen slightly. Emily would always be her daughter, her first love, her precious angel. But perhaps there was room in her heart for this wounded boy who, like her, knew the deep pain of loss. William watched from the doorway as his wife and Michael sat at the kitchen counter, steam rising from their mugs, their voices soft in the night. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was a beginning. The days following Christmas brought small but significant changes to the Thompson household. Each morning, Sarah found herself waking earlier, drawn by the quiet sounds of Michael attempting to make his own breakfast, trying not to be a burden. She'd watch from the doorway as he carefully measured cereal into a bowl, his movements precise and cautious. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore," she told him one morning, stepping into the kitchen. "Here, let me show you where we keep the fresh fruit." The smile that lit up his face at such a simple gesture made her heart ache with a mixture of joy and sadness. William discovered Michael's love of learning during an afternoon when he found the boy sitting in his study, carefully examining a world atlas. "Mr. David was teaching me geography," Michael explained, his fingers tracing mountain ranges. He said, "Knowledge is something nobody can take away from you." That evening, William brought home a stack of textbooks and school supplies. They set up a small desk in the corner of the study, creating a space that was uniquely Michael's. "We'll start with the basics," William said, helping him organize the books. "And when you're ready, we'll look into proper schooling." The hardest moments came at night, when Michael's nightmares would wake the household. He'd cry out for his mother, for Mr. David, his voice raw with grief and fear. Sarah found herself running to his room without hesitation, gathering him in her arms as she had once done for Emily. "I'm sorry," he'd whisper, trembling. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Never apologize for needing help," she'd respond, stroking his hair. That's what family is, for the word family would hang in the air between them, fragile and hopeful. During the day, Michael would sometimes follow Sarah around the house, helping with chores she had previously done alone in her grief. They developed a routine of folding laundry together, his small hands carefully matching socks while she shared stories about Emily. She used to mix up all the socks on purpose, Sarah told him, smiling at the memory. Said they got lonely wearing the same partner all the time. Michael considered this seriously. Maybe she was right, he said, deliberately mismatching a pair. Sarah's laugh, the first genuine one in months, echoed through the house. William found his own ways to connect with Michael. They spent weekends in the garage, where William taught him basic carpentry. Every person should know how to build and fix things, he explained, showing Michael how to use tools safely. The birdhouse they built together became Michael's prized possession, hung proudly outside his window. Trust came in small increments. Michael slowly stopped hiding food in his room, began to believe that meals would always be available. He started leaving his backpack containing everything he owned in his room, rather than carrying it constantly. Each small sign of trust felt like a victory. One evening, Sarah found a drawing on her pillow, 3 stick figures holding hands, with my new family written in careful letters across the top. She sat on her bed, holding the paper, tears falling freely. William found her there, and they held each other, the drawing between them like a bridge between past and future. The pivotal moment came when Michael caught a winter cold. His fever spiked one night, and the Thompsons rushed him to the hospital. In his delirium, he clutched Sarah's hand, refusing to let go. "Please don't leave me," he begged. "Like Mum, like Mr. David." "Never," Sarah promised, her voice fierce with protective love. "We're not going anywhere, Michael. You're our son now." The words, spoken instinctively, marked a turning point. In that hospital room, as Michael's fever broke and he slept peacefully between them, William and Sarah exchanged a look of understanding. They weren't replacing Emily, no one could ever do that. But their hearts had expanded, making room for this brave, wounded boy who had somehow become essential to their healing. When Michael recovered, they began the process of legal adoption. The papers sat on the kitchen table one morning as Michael came down for breakfast. He stared at them, then at William and Sarah, his eyes wide with hope and fear. "Only if you want to," William assured him. "It's your choice, Michael." Michael picked up the pen with trembling fingers. "I want to," he whispered, "more than anything." The family they formed wasn't built on forgetting their losses, but on healing together, creating something new from their shared grief and love. Christmas morning dawned with a gentle snowfall, blanketing the Thompson estate in pristine white. Michael woke early, a habit ingrained from months on the streets, but this time he found himself in a warm bed, surrounded by the comfort of his new home. He lay still for a moment, afraid that it might all be a dream. The sound of movement downstairs drew him from his room. Following the noise, he found Sarah in the kitchen, mixing pancake batter while Christmas carols played softly on the radio. She looked up as he entered, her face brightening. "Merry Christmas, Michael," she said warmly. "Would you like to help me make breakfast? It's a family tradition." Well, it used to be. Her voice caught slightly on the words. Michael nodded eagerly, washing his hands before joining her at the counter. Together they shaped the pancakes into Christmas trees and stars, a practice Sarah explained Emily had always insisted upon. Instead of bringing pain, sharing these memories now felt like building a bridge between past and present. William appeared in the doorway, carrying several wrapped packages. These were under the tree, he announced, placing them on the kitchen table, and they all seemed to have Michael's name on them. Michael's eyes widened. For me, his voice trembled. "But I didn't. I couldn't get you anything." Sarah set down her spatula and knelt beside him. "You've given us more than you know," she said softly. "You brought life back into this house." After breakfast, they gathered in the living room. The Christmas tree sparkled with lights, and beneath it lay the presents William had brought in. Michael sat cross-legged on the floor, uncertain how to proceed. "Go ahead," William encouraged. "They're all yours." With trembling hands, Michael opened the first package, new winter clothes, warm and properly sized. The second contained books, including the mathematics textbook David had been using to teach him. The third revealed art supplies, colored pencils, and sketch pads. But it was the final gift that brought tears to his eyes. A framed photograph of his mother, clearly professionally restored, sat nestled in tissue paper. Beside it was a smaller frame containing the few pictures David had taken of them during their lessons behind the restaurant. "How did you?" Michael couldn't finish the question. "We found the photo in your backpack," Sarah explained gently. "It needed some care, but we thought you'd want to have it properly displayed. And the others, some of David's co-workers, helped us find them." Michael hugged the frames to his chest, tears flowing freely now. "Thank you," he whispered. for everything. Sarah and William exchanged glances, then William stood, retrieving one final package from behind the tree. "There's one more," he said, placing it in Michael's lap. Inside was a legal document, the completed adoption papers. "We know it soon," Sarah said quickly, "and if you're not ready, we understand. But we wanted you to know that we're ready when you are." Michael stared at the papers, his vision blurring. Could I keep my mum's last name?" he asked hesitantly. "But maybe add yours too." Michael Anderson Thompson William tested the name. "Sounds perfect to me." They spent the rest of the morning playing board games Emily had loved, Sarah and William sharing stories about past Christmases. After lunch, they bundled up and went outside, building a snowman family of 4, one for each of them, and one for Emily. As evening approached, Michael helped Sarah prepare dinner, learning family recipes passed down through generations. The kitchen filled with warmth and the aroma of holiday cooking, punctuated by occasional laughter, a sound that had been absent from the house for too long. During dinner, Michael suddenly spoke up. "Mr. David always said that family isn't just about blood. It's about who loves you enough to stay, even when things are hard." Sarah reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "He was a very wise man, and he'd be so proud of you." Later, as Michael dozed on the couch, surrounded by his new possessions and wrapped in a warm blanket, Sarah and William stood watching him. The Christmas tree lights cast a gentle glow across his peaceful face. "We're not betraying Emily," Sarah said softly, voicing what they'd both been feeling. "We're honoring her by sharing the love she taught us how to give." William pulled her close. "No, we're not betraying her. We're building something new, something that includes her memory while making room for new joy." Their first Christmas together wasn't perfect. There were moments of sadness, of missing those who should have been there. But it was real, and it was real, and it was theirs, and it marked the beginning of their journey as a family. The transition from street life to the Thompson household brought both triumphs and challenges for Michael. Each day presented new experiences, some wonderful, others overwhelming. The simple act of having his own bathroom with hot water available whenever he wanted it took weeks to get used to. Mornings began with Sarah gently waking him, so different from the harsh survival instincts that had jolted him awake on the streets. She'd lay out clean clothes for him daily, though he still kept his old ones hidden under the bed, a safety net he couldn't quite let go of. The concept of having multiple sets of clothes, of not wearing everything he owned at once, felt foreign. School presented its own set of challenges. After assessment tests revealed gaps in his education, William hired tutors to work with Michael at home. The boy threw himself into learning with fierce determination, often studying late into the night. "I want to make Mr. David proud," he explained when Sarah found him asleep over his books one evening. He always said education was freedom. Social interactions proved more difficult. When the Thompsons hosted their first dinner party, Michael retreated to his room, overwhelmed by the number of people. Sarah found him huddled in his closet, breathing heavily. "Too many voices," he whispered. Too many people who he couldn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. Together, they developed a signal system. 2 quick hand squeezes meant he needed a break from social situations. Nightmares remained a constant companion. He would wake screaming, reliving David's death or his mother's final days. On those nights, both Sarah and William would come running, sitting with him until the terrors passed. They installed a small nightlight that projected stars onto his ceiling, a gentle reminder that he wasn't alone in the darkness anymore. Food continued to be a complex issue. Despite regular meals, Michael couldn't shake the habit of hoarding snacks in his room. Sarah pretended not to notice the granola bars tucked under his mattress or the apples hidden in his desk drawer. Instead, she began leaving a small basket of non-perishable snacks in his room, replenishing it quietly when it ran low. "Just in case," she said when he discovered it, understanding in her eyes. The first time Michael called them Mom and Dad happened naturally, during a mundane moment. He was helping William in the garage, passing tools as they fixed a bicycle together. "Thanks, Dad," he said absently, then froze, fear flashing across his face. William simply smiled and asked for the wrench, letting the moment settle without pressure. That night, Michael called Sarah Mom during dinner, and though tears sprang to her eyes, she just reached over and squeezed his hand. Physical affection came slowly. Michael would flinch at unexpected touches, a reflex from street survival. Sarah and William learned to telegraph their movements, always letting him see them approach. The first time Michael initiated a hug, throwing his arms around Sarah after she defended him from a rude store clerk, they all cried. Money remained a sensitive subject. Despite having everything he needed provided, Michael struggled with accepting gifts or new purchases. It's too much, he would protest when William bought him new shoes or Sarah brought home books. They found ways to involve him in household economies, teaching him about budgeting and savings, helping him understand that providing for him wasn't a burden but a joy. The hardest adjustment came with trust. Michael had learned the hard way that adults couldn't always be relied upon, that promises were often broken. When William had to travel for business the first time, Michael became withdrawn, convinced he wouldn't return. Sarah found him sleeping in William's study, surrounded by his father's belongings. Now William called every night he was away, and they kept a countdown calendar to his return. Slowly, new habits replaced old survival mechanisms. The backpack of emergency supplies moved from under his bed to his closet, then finally to the basement storage. His shoulders lost their defensive hunch, and his smile came more readily. He began to plan for the future, rather than just surviving the present. 1 year after joining the family, Michael helped Sarah plant a garden. As they worked the soil together, he talked about his mother, sharing happy memories rather than just the painful ones. "She would have liked you," he told Sarah, carefully patting soil around a tomato plant. "She always said love grows like a garden if you tend it right." The transformation wasn't complete. Some scars ran too deep to fully heal, but Michael was learning to trust in permanence, in the stability of love that didn't disappear when times got hard. The Thompsons weren't trying to erase his past or replace what he'd lost. Instead, they helped him build a bridge between who he had been and who he was becoming. The morning everything changed began with a celebration. Sarah had been nominated for a community service award for her work with disadvantaged children, inspired by Michael's presence in their lives. To mark the occasion, William suggested breakfast at Montgomery's restaurant, now considered the finest establishment in town. Michael hesitated when they arrived, his eyes drawn to the alley where he'd once hidden, where David had shown him kindness. Sarah squeezed his hand reassuringly as they entered the restaurant. Richard Montgomery himself greeted them at the door, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as they settled into their booth. "Mrs. Thompson," Richard's voice oozed charm, "I heard about your nomination. Please, allow me to prepare something special for you." His gaze flickered briefly to Michael, a flash of contempt crossing his features before the polite mask returned. Sarah ordered the chef's special breakfast, while William chose simple eggs Benedict. Michael, still uncomfortable in fancy restaurants, asked for plain toast and juice. As Richard walked away, Michael tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Mummy," whispered, the word still new and precious on his tongue, "I don't trust him. Mr. David always said." "It's all right," Sarah soothed, though she noted the tension in his small frame. "Everything's different now." Richard returned personally with their meals, placing Sarah's plate before her with flourish. "My special creation," he announced proudly. "Please taste it while it's hot." The first signs appeared within hours. Sarah complained of dizziness during their drive home, her face growing pale. By afternoon she was violently ill, her body racked with spasms that grew increasingly severe. "Something's wrong," William said, watching his wife struggle to keep even water down. "This isn't normal food poisoning." Michael hovered anxiously in the doorway of their bedroom, memories of his mother's final illness haunting his eyes. "Mom," his voice quavered, "please be okay." When Sarah's lips began turning blue, William called an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly, their faces growing serious as they assessed her condition. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," one said, already preparing the stretcher. In the emergency room, doctors rushed Sarah into intensive care. William paced the waiting room while Michael sat absolutely still, his small body rigid with fear. The boy's hands clutched the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Mr. Thompson," a doctor emerged, her expression grave. "We've found traces of industrial cleaning solution in your wife's system. This wasn't accidental food poisoning. Someone deliberately contaminated her food." William's mind flashed to Richard's strange smile, the way he'd insisted on serving Sarah personally. Beside him, Michael's breath caught. "The bad man," Michael whispered. "He did this, just like he did to Mr. David." The gravity of Michael's words hung in the air. William knelt before his son, placing gentle hands on his shoulders. "What do you mean, Michael? What happened to David?" Tears streamed down Michael's face as he told them about David's last day, the coffee, Richard's refusal to call for help, the evidence hidden behind loose bricks. "He has proof," Michael finished. "Mr. David collected it all. He showed me where to find it, just in case." William's jaw tightened as he listened. Behind them, monitors beeped steadily, marking Sarah's struggle for life. The woman who had opened her heart to a homeless child, who had found the strength to love again after losing her daughter, now fought against a poison deliberately placed in her food. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. Michael refused to leave Sarah's side, his small hand holding hers as doctors worked to flush the toxins from her system. He sang softly to her lullabies she had taught him during his own nightmares, children's songs from happier times. "Please don't leave me," he whispered when he thought William couldn't hear. "I can't lose another mum, please." William watched his son's devotion with a mixture of pride and heartache. The boy who had lost so much was showing more strength than many adults would in the same situation. Yet beneath the brave exterior, William could see the terror of potentially losing another parent figure. Sarah's condition remained critical through the night. Each hour brought new challenges as her body fought the foreign substances in her system. The doctors worked tirelessly, but the uncertainty of her recovery hung heavy in the hospital room. The whispers started in the hospital corridors, growing louder as Sarah's condition remained critical. Richard Montgomery had begun spreading his poison not just in food, but in words. He visited the hospital, expressing concern while subtly planting seeds of suspicion. "Such a tragedy," he told the nurses, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "And so strange how it happened right after they took in that street boy. You know his type, they bring nothing but trouble." The rumors spread quickly through the small town. People who had once smiled at Michael in the grocery store now pulled their children closer when he passed. At the hospital, security guards watched him more closely, their hands hovering near their radios. The situation exploded when Richard filed a police report, claiming he had security footage of Michael tampering with kitchen supplies at the restaurant. Detective Morris arrived at the hospital, his face stern as he approached William. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk about Michael," the detective said, glancing at the boy who sat beside Sarah's bed. "There are some serious allegations being made." William stood protectively between the detective and his son. "Whatever Richard Montgomery told you is a lie. Michael had nothing to do with this." Detective Morris pulled out a notebook. "According to Mr. Montgomery, the boy was seen entering the kitchen area multiple times before your visit. He has a history with the restaurant and given his background." "His background?" William's voice rose sharply. "You mean being homeless after his mother died? Being helped by David Parker, who mysteriously died after confronting Richard?" Michael's small voice interrupted them. "I know where Mr. David's evidence is," he said quietly. "He showed me before the bad man hurt him." The detective's expression shifted. "Evidence of what exactly?" But before Michael could answer, Richard appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 police officers. "I'm pressing charges," he announced. "That boy is dangerous. He should never have been allowed near decent people." William felt Michael trembling beside him. "You're the dangerous one, Richard. David knew it, and now we do too." Richard's face darkened. David Parker was a troublemaker who died of natural causes. And now this street rat you've taken in has poisoned your wife. The security footage doesn't lie. "Show us this footage," William challenged. "Show us exactly what you claim to have seen." Richard smiled coldly. "All in due time. For now, I think the boy should be removed from your custody. For everyone's safety, of course." Michael clung to William's arm, panic evident in his eyes. "Dad, please don't let them take me. I didn't do it. I promise I didn't do it." The word "Dad" echoed in the hospital corridor, and William felt his resolve strengthen. "Nobody is taking my son anywhere. Detective Morris, I suggest you look into Richard Montgomery's history of suspicious accidents at his restaurants, and Michael knows where to find proof of his crimes." Richard's smile faltered slightly. "You're believing the word of a street urchin over a respected businessman. Think carefully about your next move, Thompson. Accidents can happen to anyone." The threat hung in the air, but William stood his ground. "Is that what happened to David Parker? An accident?" The tension was broken by a nurse rushing from Sarah's room. "Mr. Thompson, she's waking up." Everyone rushed to the door, but the nurse blocked Richard's attempt to enter. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, focusing immediately on Michael. She reached for him weakly, and he ran to her side. "Mom," he sobbed, clutching her hand. "Tell them I didn't hurt you. Please tell them." Sarah's voice was weak but clear. "Richard, I saw him put something in my food when he thought. No one was watching." The detective's attention snapped to Richard, who had gone pale. "That's absurd," he sputtered. "She's confused from the medication." "No," Sarah insisted, stronger now. "I saw you, just like Michael said you did to David." Detective Morris pulled out his handcuffs. "Mr. Montgomery, I think you need to come down to the station with us." As the police led Richard away, his mask of civility cracked completely. "You'll regret this," he shouted. "All of you. That street rat has ruined everything." Michael buried his face in Sarah's shoulder, his small body shaking with relief. William wrapped his arms around both of them, his family united against the storm that had threatened to tear them apart. Despite Richard's arrest, the shadow of suspicion lingered over Michael like a dark cloud. The community, once charmed by the Thompsons' act of charity in adopting a street child, now viewed their decision with skepticism and barely concealed judgment. At the private school where Michael had recently enrolled, parents began pulling their children from classes he attended. The whispers followed him through hallways: "His kind always brings trouble, and the Thompsons should have known better." Teachers who had praised his quick mind and eagerness to learn now watched him with wary eyes, as if expecting him to suddenly reveal some hidden criminal nature. The country club where the Thompsons were longtime members sent a carefully worded letter suggesting they take a break from bringing Michael to social events. Some members have expressed concerns, the manager explained uncomfortably when William confronted him. "We have to consider everyone's comfort." Even their neighbors, who had initially brought welcome baskets and offered friendly greetings, now hurried inside when they saw Michael approaching. One afternoon, he found their previously friendly golden retriever had been moved to a backyard where it couldn't greet him through the fence anymore. Sarah, still recovering at home, watched helplessly as the community's rejection wounded her son. "They're afraid of what they don't understand," she tried to explain, holding him as he cried after another birthday party invitation was mysteriously rescinded. "But I didn't do anything wrong," Michael whispered, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to belong." The local newspaper ran a series of editorials about the risks of adopting children from troubled backgrounds. Though they never named Michael directly, the implications were clear. Letters to the editor expressed concern about the changing character of their formerly peaceful town. William's colleagues at the investment firm began questioning his judgment. "If you couldn't see the danger in taking in a street kid," one partner suggested, "maybe we should review your client portfolio." The implied threat to his career was clear. The breaking point came during a school fundraiser. Michael had worked tirelessly on his science project, creating a detailed study of urban poverty's effects on children's education. As he stood beside his display, proud of his research, a group of parents approached the principal. "This topic is inappropriate," one mother declared loudly. "He's glorifying homelessness, making our children feel guilty. This isn't the kind of social activism we need in our school." The principal, instead of defending Michael's work, asked him to remove the display. When Sarah arrived to pick him up, she found him sitting alone in the hallway, his carefully crafted project dismantled, tears silently streaming down his face. That evening, the Thompsons held a family meeting. "We could move," William suggested, "start fresh somewhere else." But Michael straightened his shoulders, showing a strength that amazed them both. "Mr. David always said running away lets the wrong people win. We have to stay and fight." Sarah and William exchanged proud glances. Their son, despite everything, refused to be broken by prejudice. They decided to fight back through action. Sarah used her nursing connections to organize a symposium on childhood homelessness, featuring experts and survivors. William leveraged his business contacts to create a scholarship fund for disadvantaged youth, naming it in David's memory. Michael, showing remarkable courage, asked to speak at a school assembly about his experiences. Standing before his peers and their parents, his voice clear and strong, he shared his story not just of hardship, but of hope and the transformative power of love. "You see me as different," he told the silent auditorium. "But I'm just a kid who lost his mom, who was hungry and scared, until someone cared enough to help. Mr. David taught me that kindness isn't weakness. My new mom and dad showed me that family isn't about where you come from, but who stands beside you when others walk away." Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Some parents approached the Thompsons after the assembly, shamefaced, offering apologies. Children, less burdened by prejudice than their parents, began inviting Michael to play again. The change wasn't universal or immediate, but it was real. For every person who still crossed the street to avoid Michael, another would deliberately stop to chat. For every invitation withdrawn, a new one would appear from unexpected sources. The winter night Sarah's condition suddenly deteriorated would forever be etched in the Thompson family's memory. The emergency room erupted into chaos as monitors screamed their warning, her body reacting violently to the lingering toxins in her system. Code blue. Room 204, the announcement echoed through the sterile corridors as medical staff rushed past William and Michael, who stood frozen in the doorway. They watched helplessly as doctors surrounded Sarah's bed, their urgent voices mixing with the harsh beeping of machines. "Her organs are failing," one doctor shouted. "We need to act now." The medical team worked with practiced efficiency, but the gravity in their expressions told its own story. Sarah's face had taken on a ghostly pallor, her breathing becoming increasingly labored. Michael clung to William's hand, his small fingers ice-cold with fear. "Dad," he whispered, "is Mum going to die like my first mom did?" The raw pain in his voice cut through William's heart like a knife. "No," William answered firmly, though his own voice trembled. "She's stronger than the poison. She has to be." He pulled Michael closer, both of them drawing strength from each other as they watched the medical team fight for Sarah's life. Dr. Reynolds emerged from the crowd around Sarah's bed, her face grave. "Mr. Thompson, we need to move her to intensive care immediately. The toxin is attacking her liver and kidneys more aggressively than we initially thought." As they wheeled Sarah away, Michael broke free from William's grasp, running alongside the gurney. "Mummy," cried out, "please wake up. You promised we'd be a family." A nurse gently caught him as the doors to the ICU swung closed, leaving them standing in the empty corridor. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. William and Michael took up residence in the ICU waiting room, neither willing to leave even as exhaustion set in. Michael refused food, his eyes fixed on the doors behind which Sarah fought for her life. Mr. David would know what to do, Michael mumbled, more to himself than to William. He always knew how to make things better. William felt tears prick his eyes at the mention of David. If only the kind-hearted kitchen worker had lived to testify against Richard, perhaps none of this would have happened. The weight of multiple tragedies pressed down on them both. Late into the night, Dr. Reynolds appeared again, looking exhausted but determined. "We've stabilized her for now," she announced, "but the next 24 hours are critical. The toxin Richard used. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Michael's head snapped up at the mention of Richard's name. "He has a special cabinet in his office," he said suddenly. "Mr. David showed me once. That's where he keeps his poisons." William immediately pulled out his phone, calling Detective Morris with this new information. As he spoke, Michael continued to watch the ICU doors, as if his gaze alone could will Sarah to recover. Around midnight, they were allowed to see her briefly. Sarah lay surrounded by machines, tubes and wires connecting her to various monitors. Her usually vibrant face was ashen, her breathing supported by oxygen. Michael approached the bed cautiously, taking her hand in his. "Mom," he whispered, "remember when you found me that first night? You said we could be a family. You can't go now. Please fight." William watched his son's gentle interaction with Sarah, remembering how far they'd come from that Christmas Eve when he'd found Michael in the alley. They had become a real family, healing each other's wounds, filling the empty spaces in each other's hearts. Dr. Reynolds entered with updated test results, her expression cautiously optimistic. "The new treatment seems to be working," she reported. "Her vital signs are improving, though slowly. Whatever was in that poison, her body is finally fighting back." As dawn approached, Sarah's color began to improve slightly. The harsh beeping of monitors softened to a more regular rhythm. Michael had finally fallen asleep in a chair beside her bed, his hand still holding hers. William stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the city. Somewhere out there, Richard Montgomery sat in a jail cell, while David's memory lingered in the shadows of his restaurant. The thought of how many lives one man's cruelty had touched filled him with a deep sadness. A small movement from Sarah's bed drew his attention. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing first on Michael's sleeping form, then finding William. Though she couldn't speak around the breathing tube, her fingers tightened slightly around Michael's hand. "We're here," William whispered, moving to her side. "We're all here together. Just keep fighting, love." From his jail cell, Richard Montgomery orchestrated a calculated campaign to destroy the evidence against him and shift blame to Michael. Through his high-priced lawyer, he began spinning a web of lies that threatened to unravel the Thompson family's unity. "My client has security footage," his attorney announced to the press, showing the boy entering the kitchen multiple times before Mrs. Thompson's unfortunate incident. "We believe this was a calculated act of revenge against the restaurant that had previously banned him." The security tapes had been carefully edited, showing only selective moments of Michael near the kitchen, cutting out the context of David helping him. Richard had spent years perfecting the art of manipulating evidence, and now he deployed every trick he knew. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, "We have witness statements from restaurant staff confirming the boy's unstable behavior and history of threatening Mr. Montgomery." The statements came from employees who had been pressured or bribed, their testimonies rehearsed to paint Michael in the worst possible light. Detective Morris sat in his office, reviewing the mounting pile of evidence with growing frustration. "It's too perfect," he muttered to William during a private meeting. "Every piece fits exactly how Montgomery wants it to fit. Real evidence is messier." Richard's influence reached beyond the legal system. Anonymous tips began appearing at local news stations, suggesting Michael's involvement in other crimes. stories of missing items from the school, mysterious accidents at the park, all carefully crafted to create a pattern of suspicious behavior. "We've discovered troubling information about the boy's past," Richard's lawyer told reporters. "Prior incidents of violence, documented behavioral issues. The records were fabricated, but they looked genuine enough to cast doubt on Michael's character." William fought back, hiring his own investigators to examine the evidence. They discovered subtle inconsistencies in the security footage timestamps that didn't match, shadows that fell in impossible directions. But Richard had anticipated this, having secondary proof ready to explain away any discrepancies. The most damaging manipulation came in the form of a doctored video showing what appeared to be Michael tampering with food in the kitchen. The footage was grainy and distant, but Richard's team had edited it skillfully enough to create doubt. "That's not even me," Michael cried when he saw the video on the news. "I never went behind the counter. Mr. David wouldn't let me." His distress was heart-wrenching, but the damage was already spreading through the community. Richard's next move was to attack David's credibility posthumously. Mr. Parker was a troubled individual with a history of mental health issues, his lawyer claimed. His accusations against my client were the product of paranoid delusions. Documents appeared suggesting David had been embezzling from the restaurant, that his death was linked to guilt over his crimes rather than any action of Richard's. The careful records David had kept of Richard's misconduct were dismissed as the ramblings of a disturbed mind. William worked tirelessly to counter each piece of false evidence. He hired digital forensics experts to analyze the security footage, track down former employees willing to testify about Richard's true nature, and gathered medical evidence about the specific poison used in Sarah's food. The poison found in Mrs. Thompson's system, William's lawyer argued, is a specialized cleaning agent only accessible to restaurant management. No child could have obtained or administered it. But Richard had an answer for everything. His team produced records showing the cleaning supplies were stored in an unlocked cabinet, accessible to anyone who entered the kitchen. They even suggested Michael might have learned about poisons during his time on the streets. The manipulation reached its peak when Richard's team attempted to discredit Sarah's own testimony. Mrs. Thompson was heavily medicated, his lawyer claimed. Her recollection of seeing my client tamper with food is clearly a drug-induced hallucination. Through it all, Michael maintained his innocence with a quiet dignity that impressed even Detective Morris. "Truth doesn't need that many props," the boy said simply, remembering David's words about honesty standing on its own. The battle over evidence continued, with Richard using his wealth and connections to create an increasingly complex web of deception. But like all carefully constructed lies, it had weak points, small inconsistencies that would eventually lead to its unraveling. With Sarah still in critical condition and Richard's manipulated evidence mounting, Michael took matters into his own hands. Late one night, while William dozed in the hospital waiting room, the boy slipped away, determined to find the proof he knew existed. "Mr. David showed me," he whispered to himself, moving through the dark streets toward Montgomery's restaurant. Behind the loose brick, under the third window, his small hands trembled as he counted the windows, remembering David's precise instructions. The restaurant stood dark and empty, police tape still marking the entrance. Michael avoided the front, making his way to the familiar alley where he'd spent so many hours with David. The dumpster that had once been his shelter now served as cover as he examined the wall. 1, 2, 3 bricks up, he counted softly, feeling each brick until one moved slightly. His heart pounding, he worked it free, reaching into the dark cavity behind. His fingers touched something, a waterproof envelope, exactly where David had said it would be. But as he pulled it out, a security light suddenly flooded the alley. "Hey," a guard shouted. "Stop right there." Michael clutched the envelope and ran, his feet remembering every escape route from his months on the streets. He could hear the guard radioing for backup, but he had the advantage of knowing every hidden passage in the area. Ducking through a narrow gap between buildings, he emerged onto a side street, his lungs burning. He didn't stop running until he reached the hospital, sneaking back in through the emergency entrance. William was awake and frantic. "Michael, where were you? I've been searching everywhere." Instead of answering, Michael held out the envelope with shaking hands. "Mr. David left proof," he gasped. He knew Richard might try to hurt someone else. Together, they opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, receipts, and a detailed journal documenting Richard's activities. David had meticulously recorded dates, times, and witnesses to various incidents at the restaurant. Most damning was a series of photographs showing Richard adding substances to food preparations, along with receipts for industrial cleaning chemicals not approved for restaurant use. David had even included samples of the substances in sealed vials, carefully labeled with dates and descriptions. "Look," Michael pointed to a specific entry. "The day before he died, Mr. David wrote about seeing Richard mix something into the cleaning supplies. He knew Richard was planning something bad." William immediately called Detective Morris, who arrived within minutes. The detective's eyes widened as he examined the evidence. "This is what we needed," he said. "David Parker was building a case against Montgomery all along." But their triumph was short-lived. As they studied the documents, an urgent announcement came over the hospital intercom, code blue, ICU room 204, Sarah's room. Michael's face went pale. "Mom," he ran toward the ICU, the precious evidence forgotten in his desperate need to reach Sarah. They found doctors working frantically to stabilize her condition. "Her system is fighting the remaining toxins," Dr. Reynolds explained. "The next few hours are crucial." Michael pressed his face against the ICU window, watching the medical team work. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't let Richard win. We need you, Mom." Through his tears, he began talking, telling Sarah about finding David's evidence, about proving his innocence. "You believed in me when nobody else did," he said. "Just like Mr. David believed in me. Please don't leave us." The monitors slowly stabilized, Sarah's vital signs returning to safer levels. Dr. Reynolds emerged, looking cautiously optimistic. "She's fighting back," she said. "Whatever was in that evidence might help us understand exactly what we're dealing with." Detective Morris had already sent the samples to the police lab for rush analysis. "If we can match these to the substances in Sarah's system," he explained, "it's over for Montgomery. No amount of manipulated evidence can counter this." Michael stayed by Sarah's window, his small hand pressed against the glass. Behind him, William and Detective Morris discussed next steps, but he focused only on his mother's face, watching for any sign of improvement. "Mr. David knew the truth would come out," he said quietly. "He taught me that good people have to be brave, even when it's scary. I had to be brave for you, Mum, just like you were brave for me." Armed with David's evidence, William launched his own investigation into Richard Montgomery's past. He hired private investigators, reached out to former employees, and began piecing together a pattern of suspicious incidents stretching back decades. 3 restaurants before this one, William told Detective Morris, spreading documents across the hospital waiting room table. All mysteriously burned down after insurance policies were increased, and at each one there were reports of employees or customers getting mysteriously ill. The investigators uncovered a trail of former workers who had tried to speak out against Richard, only to find themselves discredited or worse. Some had lost their homes in suspicious fires, others had been arrested on fabricated charges. The pattern was clear: Richard silenced anyone who threatened his carefully constructed facade. "Look at this," William pointed to a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. A health inspector who flagged violations at Richard's first restaurant died in a car accident the next day. The investigation was closed suspiciously quickly. Working through his business connections, William discovered Richard had ties to less reputable companies that supplied industrial chemicals. Bank records showed regular payments to shell companies that, when traced, led back to manufacturers of cleaning supplies not approved for restaurant use. He's been systematically poisoning people for years, William realized. Anyone who threatened his position or questioned his methods. David must have figured it out and started collecting evidence. Former employees, protected by William's lawyers, began coming forward. They spoke of strange practices in the kitchen, of Richard's obsession with controlling every aspect of the restaurant's operation, of workers who disappeared after raising concerns. He made us sign unusual confidentiality agreements, one former chef revealed. And he had this special cabinet in his office, only he had the key. We were never allowed near it, even during health inspections. William's investigation led him to Richard's childhood, revealing a disturbing pattern that had started early. School records showed incidents of other children becoming ill after accepting food from young Richard. The pattern of using food as a weapon had begun long before his restaurant career. "There's more," Detective Morris added, bringing new files. "We found connections between Montgomery and several unsolved poisoning cases in other cities. He moved around a lot before settling here, always one step ahead of suspicion." The most damning evidence came from Richard's personal computer, seized during his arrest. Hidden folders contained detailed records of his victims' dates, substances used, effects observed. It was a clinical catalogue of cruelty that made even seasoned investigators pause. He documented everything William said, reviewing the files, like he was proud of it. And David discovered these records somehow. That's why Richard had to silence him. Working late into the night, William cross-referenced the dates in Richard's files with hospital records. A pattern emerged: small clusters of poisoning cases around each of Richard's restaurants, always dismissed as food poisoning or unfortunate accidents. The investigation unveiled Richard's technique of manipulating health inspection records. He had developed a network of corrupt officials who would overlook violations in exchange for bribes or under threat of blackmail. "It's like a house of cards," William told Sarah during one of her conscious moments. "Once we started pulling at one thread, the whole thing began unraveling. David gave us the key we needed." The final piece came from an unexpected source: Richard's former accountant, who had kept her own secret records as insurance. She provided documentation of money laundering, bribery, and systematic cover-up spanning years. "I always knew something was wrong," she testified, "but he had dirt on everyone. We were all too scared to speak up. David Parker was the first person brave enough to stand against him." William compiled all the evidence into a comprehensive report, building an irrefutable case that would ensure Richard could never hurt anyone again. The truth about David's murder, Sarah's poisoning, and countless other crimes would finally come to light. The truth about David's death emerged through a series of haunting security camera footage recovered from the restaurant's backup system. Detective Morris invited William and Michael to the police station to review the evidence, warning them that it would be difficult to watch. "Are you sure you want to see this?" William asked Michael, his hand protective on the boy's shoulder. "You don't have to." Michael straightened his spine, though his voice trembled. "Mr. David died trying to protect me. I need to know what happened." The footage began playing on the station's monitor. David appeared in Richard's office, holding a thick envelope, the same evidence Michael had later retrieved from behind the brick. The timestamp showed 7:15 p.m., just hours before his death. "I know what you've been doing," David's voice came through clearly. "The poisonings, the threats, the way you treat people like they're nothing. It stops now." Richard's response was chillingly calm. "Sit down, David. Have some coffee. Let's discuss this like reasonable men." The camera caught him reaching into his desk drawer, while David was focused on the papers he'd brought. Michael gripped William's hand as they watched Richard add something to David's coffee cup when he turned to look out the window. "He didn't know," Michael whispered. "Mr. David always said never take food or drink from someone you don't trust." The footage continued, showing David taking a sip of the coffee as he outlined his evidence against Richard. Within minutes, his speech began to slur, his movements becoming uncoordinated. "Something wrong?" David Richards' voice dripped with false concern. "Perhaps you should sit down. You don't look well." They watched in horror as David realized what was happening. He struggled to reach for his phone, but his limbs wouldn't cooperate. You poisoned me, he gasped. Just like you'll poison that street rat you've been feeding, Richard replied coldly. Oh yes, I know all about your little charity project. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? David used his last strength to hide the envelope inside his jacket. Michael, he's just a child, he managed to say. Leave him alone. Children grow up, Richard answered. They remember things. They talk. I can't have that. The footage showed David collapsing, Richard watching impassively as he struggled to breathe. Instead of calling for help, Richard calmly cleaned the coffee cup, replaced it in his desk, and waited until David stopped moving. Only then did he call 911, his voice perfectly modulated to convey shock and concern. My employee just had some kind of attack, he reported. Please hurry. Michael turned away from the screen, tears streaming down his face. He died because of me, he sobbed. If he hadn't tried to help me. No, William said firmly, kneeling to meet Michael's eyes. He died because he was a good man fighting against evil. He chose to protect you, because that's what good people do. Never blame yourself for the actions of cruel men. Detective Morris stopped the footage. David Parker was a hero, he said quietly. He knew the risks, but he kept gathering evidence, kept trying to protect others, and in the end he made sure the truth would come out. The detective handed them David's autopsy report, recently updated with new toxicology findings. The poison Richard used was the same type that he later used on Sarah. David's evidence helped us identify it in time to save her life. Even in death, he was protecting people. Michael wiped his eyes, standing straighter. Mr. David always said that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always right. He taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared, it means doing what's right even when you are scared. William pulled his son close, both of them taking strength from each other as they absorbed the full truth of David's sacrifice. The security footage continued to play silently in the background, preserving forever the moment when one man's courage confronted another's cruelty. The investigation into Richard Montgomery's past revealed a pattern of deaths that stretched back over 2 decades. Detective Morris spread dozens of case files across the conference table, each representing a life cut short by Richard's calculated cruelty. It started with health inspectors, Morris explained to William. Anyone who threatened to expose violations at his restaurants would suddenly suffer accidental food poisoning. Most survived, but some weren't so lucky. The first death was Janet Cooper, a senior health inspector who had discovered dangerous chemical residues in food samples from Richard's first run. She died of apparent heart failure the day before she was scheduled to present her findings. The case was quickly closed, but David's evidence had reopened it. Look at this pattern, William pointed to a timeline they'd constructed. Every time someone got too close to the truth, they either died or disappeared. Richard didn't just kill people, he destroyed their reputations first. Thomas Martinez, a former chef who had questioned Richard's food handling practices, was found dead in his apartment after accidentally ingesting cleaning chemicals. His death had been ruled a suicide after evidence of drug use was mysteriously discovered in his home. Richard planted drugs in Martinez's apartment, Morris confirmed. Made it look like he was unstable, unreliable. Same pattern we saw with his attempts to discredit David. The most heartbreaking cases involved homeless individuals who had been Richard's earliest victims. As a young restaurant owner, he had experimented with various toxic substances, using street people as unwitting test subjects. Their deaths were barely investigated, dismissed as the sad but unremarkable end of troubled lives. He targeted the vulnerable, William said, his voice thick with disgust. People society had already forgotten, just like he tried to do with Michael. Sarah, now recovered enough to join the investigation from her wheelchair, discovered a connection between Richard and several mysterious deaths at charitable food events. He had volunteered to cater these functions, using them as opportunities to test his poisoning techniques. The homeless shelter Christmas dinner 5 years ago, Sarah read from a file. 3 people died. The investigation blamed food spoilage, but look at the symptoms identical to what I experienced. Michael, who had insisted on helping review the files, found a photo that stopped everyone in their tracks. It showed a younger Richard standing beside a soup kitchen volunteer, the same volunteer who would later die after reporting health code violations at Richard's second restaurant. He smiled in every photo Michael observed quietly, even when he knew he was going to hurt them. Mr. David said evil often wears a friendly face. The evidence painted a picture of a man who had turned murder into a methodical science. Richard kept detailed records of his victims' reactions to different substances, adjusting his techniques based on the results. The clinical nature of his documentation chilled even seasoned investigators. This wasn't just about silencing threats, Morris concluded. He enjoyed it. The power, the control, watching people suffer while maintaining his respectable facade. Among David's evidence was a list of potential future targets people Richard had marked for elimination. Sarah's name was on that list, along with several other prominent community members who had questioned his business practices. David saved more lives than we'll ever know, William realized. By stopping Richard when he did, he prevented dozens more deaths. The final count of confirmed victims reached 17, with dozens more suspected cases spanning multiple cities. Richard had moved his operation whenever suspicion grew too strong, leaving a trail of grieving families and unanswered questions. Each victim has a story, Sarah insisted, organizing the files. We need to make sure they're all heard. It's not just about convicting Richard, it's about restoring dignity to the people he tried to erase. As they worked to document every death, every ruined life, Michael created a memorial wall in their home office. He pinned up photos of the victims, including David's picture in the center. So we never forget, he explained. Mr. David said remembering is a way of honoring. The revelation came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Michael was helping Sarah tend her garden when Detective Morris's car pulled into their driveway. Behind his police cruiser was another vehicle, and in it sat a woman whose face Michael had only seen in the worn photograph he kept beside his bed. Michael, the detective said gently, your biological mother has come forward. She's alive. The gardening trowel slipped from Michael's hands, hitting the soil with a dull thud. Sarah instinctively moved closer to him, her protective instinct kicking in as Emma Anderson stepped out of the car. My baby, Emma whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. She looked different from the photo, thinner, older, her eyes carrying years of pain. I never died, Michael. I'm so sorry. The story spilled out in Detective Morris's office. Emma had been involved with dangerous people, owing money she couldn't repay. They had threatened Michael's life, forcing her to make an impossible choice. She had staged her death, believing it would keep her son safe. I watched from far away, she explained, tears streaming down her face. I saw you on the streets, but I couldn't. I couldn't risk them finding you. Then I read about the Montgomery case in the papers, saw your name. Michael sat between Sarah and William, his small body rigid with emotion. You let me think you were dead, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I cried every night. I was alone, hungry, scared. Emma reached across the desk, trying to take his hand, but Michael pulled away. I had no choice, she pleaded. They would have hurt you to get to me, I thought. I thought someone would help you. Someone did, Michael replied, looking at Sarah and William. My real parents helped me. Mr. David helped me. Where were you when Richard tried to kill me? When I was sleeping behind dumpsters. Sarah squeezed Michael's shoulder gently. Maybe we should take some time, she suggested. This is a lot to process. But Emma pressed on, pulling out papers from her bag. I want custody of my son, she announced. I'm his biological mother. I have rights. The word rights seemed to break something in Michael. He stood up, his small frame shaking with anger and hurt. Rights? You gave up your rights when you left me. The Thompsons are my parents now. They chose me. They stayed. William stepped forward. "Mrs. Anderson, Michael has been through enough trauma. Whatever your intentions were, he's found stability and love with us. We're in the middle of legally adopting him." "He's my son," Emma cried, her voice rising. "I gave birth to him. You can't just take him away." "You took yourself away," Michael said quietly, with a maturity that made the room fall silent. "Mum and Dad," he looked at the Thompsons, "they taught me that being a parent means being there, no matter what. It means putting your child first. You didn't do that." Detective Morris intervened, suggesting they all take time to consider what was best for Michael. But as they left his office, Emma made one last attempt. "I can explain everything," she called after Michael. "If you'll just listen." Michael turned back, his eyes filled with tears but his voice steady. "I used to dream about this," he said, "about you coming back. But I'm not that lonely little boy anymore. I have a family now. A real one." Emma watched helplessly as Michael walked away with the Thompsons, his hands held tightly by the parents who had chosen him, loved him, and stayed by his side through everything. That night, as Sarah tucked him into bed, Michael finally broke down. "Why wasn't I enough?" he sobbed. "Why didn't she love me enough to stay?" Sarah held him close, her own tears falling. "Sometimes people make choices they think are right, even when they're wrong. But never doubt that you are enough, Michael. You are so loved, so precious to us." In his room, Michael looked at the two photographs on his bedside table, one of Emma from happier times, and one of his new family, including a picture of David he'd added to their collection. Two versions of love, one that left, and one that stayed. The hospital corridor echoed with urgent footsteps as Sarah's condition suddenly deteriorated. The poison in her system, though partially treated, had begun attacking her organs with renewed vigor. Medical staff rushed in and out of her room, their faces grim with determination. "Her kidneys are failing," Dr. Reynolds explained to William and Michael. "The toxin has caused severe damage to her internal organs. We need to make decisions quickly." Michael stood pressed against the observation window, his small hands leaving smudges on the glass as he watched the medical team work. The monitors surrounding Sarah beeped with increasing urgency, each sound a reminder of how precarious her condition had become. "She was getting better," Michael whispered, his voice breaking. "You said she was getting better." Dr. Reynolds knelt beside him, speaking gently but honestly. "Sometimes with poisoning there are unexpected complications. The toxin Richard used. It's complex, designed to cause lasting damage." William pulled Michael close as the boy began to tremble. "What are our options?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady for his son's sake. "We need to put her on dialysis immediately," Dr. Reynolds replied. "And there's a specialized treatment available, but it's experimental. We need your consent, Mr. Thompson." Through the window they could see Sarah's face, pale and drawn, oxygen mask fogging with each labored breath. The strong, loving woman who had opened her heart to a homeless child now looked terrifyingly fragile. "Will it save her?" Michael asked, his eyes fixed on Sarah's face. "It's our best chance," Dr. Reynolds answered, "but there are risks. The treatment is intense and in her weakened state." William signed the consent forms with a shaking hand, while Michael pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "Please fight, Mom," he whispered. "We need you. I can't lose another mother." The treatment began immediately. Hours passed in agonizing slowness as they waited for any sign of improvement. Michael refused to leave, even to eat, maintaining his vigil at the window. He held David's photograph in his hands, as if drawing strength from the memory of his first protector. "Mr. David would know what to do," he said softly. "He always knew how to make things better." William squeezed his son's shoulder. "Sarah's strong, just like David was strong. She's fighting for us, Michael. We have to believe that." Around midnight, Sarah's vital signs began to fluctuate wildly. Alarms blared as her heart rate spiked, then plummeted. Medical staff rushed in, their movements urgent but coordinated. "Code Blue," the announcement echoed through the corridors, sending chills down Michael's spine. They watched helplessly as the medical team worked to stabilize her. Dr. Reynolds' voice carried through the door. "We're losing her. Push one more round of medication." Michael broke away from William, bursting into the room despite the nurse's attempts to stop him. He reached Sarah's bed, grabbing her hand. "Mom, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "You promised we'd be a family. You can't go like Mr. David did. Please stay with us." The monitors continued their frantic beeping, but something seemed to change. Sarah's fingers twitched slightly in Michael's grasp, and her heart rate began to stabilize. "That's it," Dr. Reynolds encouraged. "Keep fighting, Sarah. Your family needs you." Hours passed, and slowly, incrementally, Sarah's condition began to improve. The experimental treatment, combined perhaps with the strength of her son's love, seemed to be working. By dawn, she had stabilized enough for Michael to sit beside her bed, still holding her hand. William watched his son's unwavering devotion, seeing in him the same strength that had helped him survive on the streets. "She's going to make it," Michael said with quiet certainty. "Mr. David is watching over us. He wouldn't let Richard win again." Dr. Reynolds confirmed his faith later that morning. "The treatment is working," she announced. "Sarah's kidneys are showing signs of recovery. She's not out of danger yet, but she's fighting back." Michael laid his head on the edge of Sarah's bed, finally allowing exhaustion to overtake him. In his sleep, he kept his grip on her hand, as if his touch alone could anchor her to life. The breakthrough came when construction workers renovating Montgomery's restaurant discovered a hidden safe behind a false wall in Richard's office. Detective Morris arrived within minutes of the call, accompanied by William and a forensics team. "It was right here all along," William said, watching the technicians carefully open the aged metal door. "David must have known about it. That's why Richard was so desperate to silence him." Inside the safe, they found decades of meticulously documented crimes. Richard had kept detailed journals recording every poisoning, every threat, every life he had destroyed. The clinical precision of his notes revealed a calculating mind that took pride in its cruelty. "Look at this," Detective Morris held up a leather-bound notebook. He recorded recipes for his poisons, noting which combinations caused the most suffering while remaining hard to detect. He was perfecting his technique for years, but the evidence was damning. Photographs showed Richard tampering with food, adding substances to drinks, watching his victims from a distance. Each image was dated and annotated with disturbing attention to detail. He kept trophies, one investigator noted, pulling out a box of personal items taken from his victims. Among them was David's name tag, still stained with coffee from his final confrontation with Richard. William's hands shook as he examined a folder labeled Targets. Inside were surveillance photos of Sarah, along with detailed plans for her poisoning. He'd been watching us for months, he realized. Ever since we took Michael in. The most shocking discovery was a series of videos Richard had recorded of his victims' final moments. David's death was among them, filmed from multiple angles, showing Richard's calm demeanor as he watched his poison take effect. "This is why David started gathering evidence," William said quietly. "He must have found these recordings. He knew Richard had to be stopped before he could hurt anyone else." Financial records revealed a complex web of bribes and payoffs stretching back years. Health inspectors, local officials, even police officers had been compromised, allowing Richard to operate with impunity. He built an empire on suffering, Detective Morris observed, sorting through bank statements. Used the money from his successful restaurants to silence anyone who might expose him. The forensics team discovered something else, a hidden computer server containing encrypted files. When decoded, they revealed Richard's connection to mysterious deaths in other cities, cases that had gone cold years ago. "It's like he wanted to document everything," one technician remarked. "Like this was all some kind of twisted experiment to him." Among the files was a folder labeled Street Rats, Richard's documentation of homeless people he had used as test subjects. Michael's photo was there, along with notes about planning to use him to discredit David. He saw them as disposable, Detective Morris said, his voice tight with anger. People no one would miss, but David saw their humanity. That's what made him dangerous to Richard. The evidence painted a picture of a man who had turned murder into an art form, who took pleasure in destroying lives while maintaining his respected position in society. Each new discovery added to the weight of his crimes. William found a final piece of evidence, a letter David had written the day he died, addressed to the police. "If you're reading this," it began, "then Richard Montgomery has finally silenced me. But he can't silence the truth." The letter detailed everything David had discovered, including the locations of other evidence caches he had hidden throughout the city. He had created a network of proof so extensive that even his death couldn't prevent the truth from emerging. David knew, William said softly. He knew Richard would eventually kill him, but he made sure his death would mean something. By day's end, the evidence filled dozens of boxes. Richard's carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the monster beneath. His reign of terror, built on poison and fear, was finally exposed to the light. At the hospital, Michael sat beside Sarah's bed as William shared the discoveries. "Mr. David won," the boy said simply. "Even after Richard killed him, he still won." Following the discovery in Richard's office, Detective Morris received an anonymous package. Inside was a USB drive and a letter in David's handwriting to be delivered in the event of my death. The contents would reveal the full extent of David's determination to expose Richard's crimes. He recorded everything, Detective Morris explained, showing William the files. Voice recordings from hidden microphones, cell phone videos, photographs taken through windows. David was building a case for months. The recordings began with mundane conversations in the restaurant kitchen, but quickly revealed Richard's true nature. In one clip, he threatened a young waitress who had questioned his food handling practices. "Accidents happen to people who ask too many questions," his voice dripped with menace. David had catalogued each incident meticulously, creating a timeline of Richard's escalating behavior. His notes included dates, times, and witnesses, many of whom were now willing to come forward with David's evidence supporting their claims. "Listen to this," William said, playing another recording. It captured Richard discussing plans to poison a health inspector who had scheduled a surprise visit. "He's so casual about it, like he's planning a dinner menu instead of murder." The most haunting recordings were David's personal journals, audio diaries he'd made explaining his actions. "I know he'll probably kill me," his voice was steady despite the grim prediction, "but I have to protect these kids. Michael and all the others Richard sees as disposable." David had created an intricate system of dead drops throughout the city, leaving evidence in multiple locations. "If you're watching this," he said in one video, "I've hidden copies of everything in places Richard would never think to look. Follow the clues. The truth has to come out." The documents included detailed floor plans of the restaurant, marking where Richard stored his poisons and conducted his experiments. David had even managed to obtain samples of the toxic substances, carefully preserved with documentation of when and how they were used. He wasn't just gathering evidence, Detective Morris noted. He was creating a fail-safe. Even if Richard destroyed some of the proof, there would always be more copies hidden away. Among the files were hundreds of photographs showing Richard tampering with food, meeting with corrupt officials, and disposing of evidence. David had risked his life to capture these images, often staying late after his shift or arriving hours early. One recording, dated the day before David's death, revealed his final message to Michael. "You're stronger than you know, kid." His voice was gentle. "Don't let the darkness in this world dim your light. There are good people out there who will help you, just like I tried to help." The evidence extended beyond Richard's current crimes. David had uncovered connections to suspicious deaths at Richard's previous restaurants, tracking down witnesses and documenting patterns that police had missed. He built a complete case, William said, reviewing the files. Every detail, every connection, all leading back to Richard. David knew he might not live to see justice done, but he made sure it would happen anyway. The most damning evidence was a series of chemical analyses David had commissioned from an independent laboratory. He had secretly submitted samples of Richard's special cleaning supplies, proving they contained deadly poisons not approved for restaurant use. In his final recording, made just hours before his confrontation with Richard, David's voice carried both resignation and determination. "If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. But Richard's reign of terror ends here. The truth doesn't die with me." Michael listened to the recordings with tears streaming down his face, hearing his protector's voice one last time. He knew the boy whispered. He knew what would happen, but he did it anyway. To save us. The evidence David gathered became the foundation of the case against Richard. Each document, each recording, each photograph was another nail in the coffin of Richard's freedom. David's meticulous attention to detail ensured that no legal loophole could save his killer. As David's evidence became public, the community's attitude toward Michael underwent a dramatic transformation. The same people who had once crossed the street to avoid him now approached with tears in their eyes, offering apologies and support. The change began at Michael's school, where the principal called a special assembly. "We owe Michael Anderson Thompson an apology," she announced, her voice thick with emotion. "We judged him without knowing his story. We failed to see his courage and strength." Students who had once whispered behind his back now surrounded him with protection and friendship. The boy who had shared David's last moments, who had helped expose a killer, became someone they admired rather than feared. "My mom says you're a hero," one classmate told him during lunch. "She says you and Mr. David saved a lot of people." Soon Michael's lunch table, once empty, became the most crowded in the cafeteria. The country club that had asked the Thompsons to take a break sent a formal letter of apology, accompanied by a lifetime family membership. More importantly, they established a scholarship fund in David's name for underprivileged children. Local businesses that had once posted no loitering signs specifically to deter homeless children now joined together to create a youth outreach program. David Parker showed us what one person's kindness can do, the Chamber of Commerce president announced. It's time we all followed his example. The restaurant's former employees organized a memorial service for David, held in the park where he had often fed homeless children. Hundreds attended, including many of the street kids he had helped over the years. Michael stood at the podium, his voice clear and strong. "Mr. David taught me that kindness is stronger than hate," he said. "He believed in me when nobody else did, and he died protecting me and others like me. Now it's our turn to protect each other." The community's support extended beyond mere words. A group of local lawyers offered pro bono services to help the Thompsons finalize Michael's adoption. Construction companies volunteered to renovate the old restaurant building into a youth center bearing David's name. Sarah, now recovering at home, received daily visits from neighbors bringing meals and offers of help. The same people who had once questioned her decision to adopt Michael now praised her family's courage and compassion. "We were blind," one neighbor admitted, bringing over a homemade casserole. "We saw what we wanted to see instead of what was real. Michael has taught us all about true strength." The local newspaper, which had once published editorials questioning the wisdom of adopting street children, now ran a series highlighting successful adoption stories. Michael's story was featured prominently, alongside tributes to David's sacrifice. Even the police department, chastened by their initial skepticism of Michael's accusations, instituted new training programs for officers dealing with homeless youth. "David Parker and Michael Thompson have shown us where our system failed," the chief announced. "We're committed to doing better." The transformation reached its peak during a city council meeting where Michael was invited to speak about homeless youth advocacy. The chambers were packed, with people standing in the aisles to hear him. "Every kid on the street has a story," he told them. "Just like I had a story. Mr. David understood that. He knew that sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. That's what changes lives. The council responded by allocating funds for a new shelter and education program. They named it the David Parker Memorial Youth Center, with Michael invited to cut the ribbon at its opening. As winter approached, the community organized a coat and blanket drive for homeless children. The response was overwhelming, with donations flooding in from across the city. Michael helped distribute the items, remembering his own cold nights on the streets. The courtroom fell silent as Richard Montgomery was led in, his designer suit replaced by prison orange, his once proud bearing now diminished by the weight of his crimes. Michael sat between Sarah and William in the front row, his small hand gripping David's photograph. Today, the prosecutor began, we present evidence of crimes spanning 2 decades. Murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, and countless acts of cruelty perpetrated by a man who viewed human life as disposable. The evidence unfolded methodically. David's recordings played through the courtroom speakers, his voice strong and clear even after death. Security footage showed Richard's calculated poisonings, while forensic experts detailed the sophisticated toxins he had used. Former employees testified one after another, their stories forming a pattern of intimidation and violence. He threatened my family, one waitress sobbed. Said my children might have accidents if I spoke up about what I saw. The most powerful testimony came from families of Richard's victims, parents who had lost children, spouses left alone, all seeking closure for deaths that had been dismissed as accidents. Each story added to the weight of justice pressing down on Richard's shoulders. Michael's testimony was brief but devastating. He described David's kindness, his efforts to protect the vulnerable, and his final confrontation with Richard. The jury watched, riveted, as this small boy spoke with clarity and courage about witnessing both the worst and best of humanity. Mr. David died trying to save people, Michael concluded, looking directly at Richard, but he won, because the truth came out just like he said it would. Sarah testified from her wheelchair, still recovering but determined to face her would-be killer. She described the poisoning, the pain, and most importantly, Richard's calm demeanor as he watched her consume the tainted food. The defense tried to paint Richard as a successful businessman brought down by false accusations, but David's meticulous evidence left no room for doubt. Each attempt to discredit a witness was met with another recording, another document, another piece of irrefutable proof. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury took less than 2 hours to reach their verdict. The courtroom tensed as the foreman stood, paper trembling slightly in their hand. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. Richard's facade finally cracked, his face contorted with rage as he lunged toward Michael, screaming threats, but deputies quickly restrained him, dragging him away as he shouted promises of revenge. The judge's sentence was unprecedented: multiple life terms without possibility of parole, plus additional years for each attempted murder and conspiracy charge. Mr. Montgomery. She declared, "You have demonstrated a level of calculated cruelty that this court has rarely witnessed. You will spend the remainder of your life ensuring that you can never harm another person." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around the Thompsons. Michael stepped up to the microphones, his voice steady despite his tears. "This victory belongs to Mr. David," he said. "He gave his life to protect others, and now justice has been served. But our work isn't done. There are still kids on the streets who need help, who need someone to believe in them, like Mr. David believed in me." The verdict brought closure to dozens of families. Richard's hidden assets were seized and converted into a victims' compensation fund. The restaurant was transformed into a community center, with David's portrait hanging in the entrance as a reminder of one man's courage. As Richard was led away to begin his sentence, Michael turned to his parents. "It's really over," he whispered. "Mr. David can rest now." Sarah pulled him close, while William rested a hand on his shoulder. Together they watched justice being served, knowing that David's sacrifice had not been in vain. Richard Montgomery's empire crumbled spectacularly in the days following his conviction. His restaurants across the city were shuttered, their windows plastered with police notices and newspaper headlines detailing his crimes. The reputation he had spent decades building dissolved like poison in a coffee cup. In prison, stripped of his expensive suits and powerful connections, Richard faced the harsh reality of his new life. The man who had once commanded fear and respect now found himself at the bottom of the hierarchy, just another inmate in an orange jumpsuit. His legal appeals were systematically rejected as more evidence emerged. Former employees, no longer afraid, came forward with additional testimonies. Each new revelation added years to his sentence, until the possibility of freedom became a distant memory. The police investigation expanded to include Richard's business partners and corrupt officials who had enabled his crimes. Health inspectors who had accepted bribes were arrested. Local politicians who had turned blind eyes in exchange for campaign contributions found themselves under scrutiny. Richard's financial empire unraveled as forensic accountants traced decades of money laundering and fraud. His hidden accounts were frozen, his properties seized. The wealth he had accumulated through years of criminal activity was systematically dismantled and redirected to his victims. In a final act of justice, the court ordered Richard to watch as his flagship restaurant was ceremonially transformed into the David Parker Memorial Youth Center. He was forced to witness via prison video feed as Michael cut the ribbon, surrounded by community leaders and former street children who had found hope in the very place that had once been a source of terror. The media coverage was relentless. Journalists dug deep into Richard's past, uncovering a pattern of cruelty that stretched back to his childhood. Former classmates recalled his early experiments with poison, his manipulation of others, his ruthless climb to power. Prison psychiatrists diagnosed him with severe antisocial personality disorder, noting his complete lack of remorse. In mandatory counseling sessions, Richard maintained his superiority, refusing to acknowledge the pain he had caused or the lives he had destroyed. His own family disowned him publicly. His wife filed for divorce, his children changed their surnames, all attempting to distance themselves from his toxic legacy. The Montgomery name, once associated with success and refinement, became synonymous with cruelty and murder. During his first month in prison, Richard received hundreds of letters from his victims' families. Each envelope contained photographs of those he had harmed, stories of the lives he had cut short, and the lasting impact of his actions. Prison guards reported that he tore each letter to shreds without reading them. The final blow to Richard's ego came when a best-selling book about his crimes was published, with all proceeds going to homeless youth programs. The author dedicated it to David Parker and Michael, describing them as the unlikely heroes who brought down a monster. In his maximum security cell, Richard Montgomery, once the king of his domain, now spent his days in isolation, his only company the ghosts of those he had killed, and the knowledge that his true nature had finally been exposed to the world. Sarah's journey back to health was marked by small victories and unwavering family support. Each day brought new progress, first sitting up without help, then taking tentative steps with a walker, finally managing short walks in the hospital garden with Michael and William by her side. "You're getting stronger," Mum Michael would say each morning, his face lighting up at every small improvement. He had taken to reading to her during his visits, sharing the books David had once used to teach him, filling her recovery room with stories of hope and perseverance. The day Sarah finally returned home, the house was transformed. William and Michael had worked tirelessly to prepare for her homecoming, setting up a comfortable recovery space in the living room. Flowers filled every surface, their fragrance a welcome change from the sterile hospital environment. "We're all together now," Sarah said softly as William helped her settle onto the couch. Michael curled up beside her, careful not to disturb her healing body but needing to be close. The family that had been forged in crisis was finally whole again. Physical therapy sessions became a family affair. Michael would count out Sarah's exercises, offering enthusiastic encouragement for each achievement. William modified the house to make it more accessible, his love evident in every thoughtful adaptation. The community support continued to pour in. Neighbors organized a meal rotation, ensuring the family had fresh, home-cooked food every day. Sarah's former nursing colleagues stopped by regularly, offering professional care and friendly companionship. "But I never knew we had so many friends," Sarah remarked one evening, watching Michael arrange yet another bouquet of well wishes. "Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to realize how much you really have." As Sarah grew stronger, the family began establishing new routines. Evening board games replaced hospital visits, laughter echoing through rooms that had once been silent with worry. Michael's nightmares decreased as he watched Sarah's recovery progress, his fear of losing another parent gradually easing. They celebrated each milestone: the first time Sarah could climb the stairs unassisted, her return to gentle gardening with Michael's help, the day she was strong enough to attend his school play. Each achievement was photographed and added to their family album, creating a chronicle of healing and hope. The most emotional moment came when Sarah was finally well enough to visit David's memorial at the youth center. Standing there with her family, she touched his photograph gently. "Thank you," she whispered, "for protecting my son, for giving us the truth, for everything." Michael had placed fresh flowers beneath David's picture, arranging them carefully. "He would be happy now," he said, taking Sarah's hand, "seeing us together, seeing you strong again. Mr. David always said family was the best medicine." As summer approached, Sarah surprised everyone by suggesting a family picnic in the park. It was a simple outing, but it represented how far they had come. Watching Sarah and Michael play a gentle game of catch while lunch was being prepared, William felt tears of gratitude fill his eyes. That evening, sitting on their porch swing, Sarah held her family close. "We're not just survivors now," she said softly. "We're living, really living. And that's the greatest victory of all." The final custody hearing was scheduled for a bright spring morning. Michael sat between Sarah and William in the courthouse, watching as his biological mother, Emma, entered with her lawyer. The past months of her attempting to reclaim parental rights had taken their toll on everyone, but today would bring resolution. "The court will now hear statements regarding the custody of Michael Anderson," the judge announced. "We'll begin with Mrs. Emma Anderson." Emma approached the podium, her hands trembling as she held her prepared statement. "I made mistakes," she began, her voice breaking. "Terrible mistakes. I thought I was protecting my son by leaving, but I only caused him pain. I'm asking for a chance to make things right." Michael listened quietly, his hand holding Sarah's tightly. He remembered the cold nights on the streets, the hunger, the loneliness that had followed Emma's disappearance. But he also remembered the warmth of finding a new family, the love that had healed those wounds. When it was his turn to speak, Michael stood tall, his voice clear and steady. "I used to dream about my mom coming back," he said, looking directly at Emma. "But when I needed someone most, the Thompsons found me. They chose me, loved me, stayed with me through everything." He turned to look at Sarah and William, his eyes filling with tears. "They're my parents now, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. They taught me what real family means. It's about who stays, who fights for you, who makes you feel safe." The judge listened intently as Michael continued. "Mr. David taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about love and trust and being there no matter what. Sarah and William, Mom and Dad, they've been there. Through the nightmares, through Richard's threats, through everything." Emma began to cry softly as Michael spoke about his new life, his room filled with books, family game nights, the garden he and Sarah tended together, the carpentry projects he worked on with William. Each memory was a testament to the bonds that had formed, stronger than genetics. "I forgive you," Michael said to Emma, his voice gentle. "I understand you thought you were protecting me, but I have a family now, a real home. I want to stay with them." The judge's decision was swift and definitive. Full custody was granted to the Thompsons, with Emma granted limited visitation rights if Michael chose to accept them. The finality of the moment hung in the air as the gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, Emma approached Michael one last time. "I hope someday you'll understand," she whispered. "I do love you." Michael hugged her briefly, then stepped back to stand with Sarah and William. "I know you do," he replied, "but love isn't just about feelings. It's about choices. And I choose them." As they drove home, Michael sat in the back seat, watching his parents in the rearview mirror. "Can we stop by the youth center?" he asked suddenly. "I want to tell Mr. David about today." At David's memorial, Michael placed a fresh flower beneath the photograph. "I finally have the family you wanted for me," he said softly. "You were right, sometimes the best families are the ones we choose." That evening, as the family sat together at dinner, Michael looked around at the faces of his chosen parents, Sarah's gentle smile, William's proud eyes, and felt complete. The journey from street child to beloved son had been long and painful, but he was finally truly home. The David Parker Memorial Youth Center opened its doors on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after his death. The transformed restaurant building now stood as a beacon of hope, its walls painted with bright murals depicting scenes of children playing, learning, and growing together. Michael stood at the podium during the opening ceremony, his family proudly watching from the front row. The crowd gathered included community leaders, former street children, and many of the people whose lives David had touched. "Mr. David once told me that kindness never dies," Michael began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "He said it grows like seeds planted in good soil. This center is those seeds growing into something beautiful." The facility had been designed with David's vision in mind. The former kitchen where he had secretly fed homeless children was now a fully equipped cafeteria serving 3 meals daily. The storage room where he had hidden Michael was transformed into a library filled with books and comfortable reading nooks. "No child will ever have to hide here," Sarah announced, cutting the ribbon. "This is a place of safety, of learning, of hope. Everything David fought for, everything he believed in, lives on in these walls." The center included dormitory-style rooms for emergency housing, classrooms for tutoring and education programs, and medical facilities staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses. Every detail had been carefully planned to provide the comprehensive support David had tried to offer single-handedly. William unveiled the central feature, a wall-sized photograph of David, smiling warmly, surrounded by quotes from the many people he had helped. "David Parker saw the best in everyone," the inscription read. "He taught us that one person's kindness can change countless lives." The first children arrived that afternoon, 3 siblings who had been living in their car. Michael helped show them around, remembering his own fear and uncertainty when David had first offered him help. "You're safe now," he told them, leading them to the cafeteria. "Just like Mr. David helped me, we're going to help you." As evening approached, the center hummed with activity. Volunteer teachers worked with children in the classrooms, social workers met with families in private counseling rooms, and the kitchen served hot meals to anyone who needed them. Sarah, now fully recovered, organized the medical clinic, ensuring that every child received proper health care. William managed the financial aspects, creating sustainable funding programs to keep David's legacy alive. The center quickly became more than just a shelter, it became a symbol of community transformation. Local businesses offered job training programs, schools provided tutoring volunteers, and families opened their homes to children in need. Michael spent every afternoon there after school, helping younger children with their homework, sharing his story, and keeping David's memory alive through acts of kindness. "This is how we fight darkness," he told a group of children one day. "Not with more darkness, but with light. Mr. David taught me that, and now I'm teaching you." On quiet evenings, Michael would sometimes sit in the garden planted behind the center, where David's favorite quotes were engraved on stone markers along the paths. "Every child deserves a chance," one read. Sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in them. The center became exactly what David had dreamed of, a place where no child would ever feel unwanted or alone, where kindness was the foundation of every interaction, where hope could take root and grow. Thank you for joining us for this touching story of love, redemption, and the power of human kindness. If this narrative moved you as much as it moved us, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how the story of Michael, David, and the Thompsons resonated with you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that makes a difference. If you found value in this story, please hit the like button and share it with friends and family who might need a reminder that goodness still exists in the world. Together, we can spread messages of hope, kindness, and the enduring power of love. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.